Chapter 243. Han Yunxi never thought that Long Fei Yi would appear here. Had this guy and Tang Li been here for a long time, or had they met by chance? She only felt that the top of her head was cold, and her waist was being held very tightly. Long Fei Yi didn't seem to be in a good mood. She wanted to raise her head and look at Long Fei Yi's face, but she didn't have the courage. She didn't owe him anything, and she didn't do anything wrong, but she felt guilty. However, just as Han Yunxi was immersed in her own world, she suddenly heard an unusually sharp whooshing sound behind her. The Tang sect's hidden weapons were very small, and they rarely made any obvious sounds when they were used. However, the sound behind her was so sharp that there was no doubt that a large number of hidden weapons had been fired at the same time, and they were very fast. Hearing this sound and seeing so many Tang sect's hidden guards just now, Han Yunxi realized that Long Fei Yi had come prepared. How did this guy know that she had an appointment with Junie Xie? At this time, Long Fei Yi had already walked out of the room with her in his arms. With a creak, the door was closed behind them. As soon as she heard this sound, Han Yunxi, who was still in a daze, suddenly changed her expression. She broke free from Long Fei Yi's arm and turned around to look. She saw that the windows on both sides were also closed, and several Tang sect's hidden guards were blocking the door and window. This was like sealing off the entire private room. The Tang sect's blockade. Han Yunxi immediately understood what was going on. This was a very terrifying formation of the Tang sect's hidden weapons attack. This was a completely sealed attack. Once it was sealed, unless someone was released from the outside, no one inside could come out. This was because the hidden guards inside were already prepared to sacrifice themselves, and their bodies were the final hidden weapons. Everyone would die, including those hidden guards. Therefore, the Tang sect's blockade was also known as the human hidden weapons. Gu is still in the room. Han Yunxi was so anxious that her face turned pale. She shouted at Long Fei Yi loudly. Long Fei Yi's gloomy face darkened even more. He asked coldly, "So? Open the door." Han Yunxi was so anxious that she was in a mess. She wanted to open the door, but the Tang clan guards didn't budge at all. "Open the door, our men are still inside." Han Yunxi was really anxious. Although she often disliked Gu, she had long regarded him as a friend in her heart. The secret guards of the Tang sect only obeyed the orders of Tang Li and Long Fei Yi. In the face of Han Yunxi's shouts, they remained indifferent. Han Yunxi turned around and looked at Long Fei Yi for help. She finally noticed the murderous intent in Long Fei Yi's eyes. For a moment, she fell silent. Long Fei Yi only glanced at her coldly and ignored her. He turned around and walked to the side. He leaned against the railing with his hands behind his back like a king who ruled over everything. He looked down at Tang Li's situation downstairs. Han Yunxi knew that Long Fei Yi had been looking for opportunities to deal with Gu ever since the incident at the Celestial Fragrance Tea House. However, she never thought that Long Fei Yi would be so ruthless as to really want Gu's life. Looking at Long Fei Yi's cold back, Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with determination. As soon as she turned around, the pear blossom teardrop rain poison needles flew out of her sleeves. The secret guards at the door were not on guard against Han Yunxi. Faced with the sudden attack of the poison needles, they could not dodge in time. She hit their vital points and killed them. After that, Han Yunxi viciously kicked at the door. Unfortunately, she was too weak and didn't manage to kick it open. Meanwhile, the guards on the side had already rushed over. Long Fei turned around as well, his eyes filled with warning. Han Yunxi ignored that she was very clear that she had killed the secret guards of the Tang sect. They were the subordinates of Tang Li and Long Fei Yi. However, she did not care so much. As she continued to kick the door, she used both hands to shoot poison needles to prevent the secret guards from approaching. Gu was here to help her. Today, even if she had to fall out with Long Fei Yi, even if she had to risk her life, she had to save Gu. The Pear Blossom Teardrop Rain was a secret weapon specially made by Tang Li. It was quite reliable and could block the secret guards on both sides. Han Yunxi used both hands to shoot poison needles, so she could only use her feet to kick the door. Damn it, why was the door so tightly shut? Han Yunxi kicked until her feet hurt, but it still did not move an inch. She gritted her teeth, turned sideways, and her whole body fiercely crashed into the door. Finally, the door was knocked open. However, before Han Yunxi could see the situation inside clearly, Long Fei Yi appeared out of thin air at the door. His tall and imposing figure blocked Han Yunxi's line of sight. He faced her and looked down at her from above. "What are you doing?" "I just said that Gu is inside." Han Yunxi was impatient. She could already smell the thick smell of blood in the room. "What does it have to do with you whether he's dead or alive?" Long Fei Yi asked again. "What does it have to do with you?" Han Yunxi retorted angrily. Without waiting for Long Fei Yi to answer, she reached out to push him. "Please move aside." However, how could Han Yunxi push Long Fei Yi away? No matter how hard she tried, she could not move him at all. Long Fei Yi lowered his head to look at Han Yunxi's hand that was pressed against his chest. He could not understand. This woman was usually timid in front of him, but why would she be so daring every time for outsiders matters? Why would she shout at him and hit him? "He's here to help me." The matter of the traitor last time had nothing to do with him. "Why do you want his life?" Han Yunxi questioned. "That also has nothing to do with you." Long Fei Yi's cold voice gradually revealed suppressed anger. Previously, he did not have the heart to kill Gu, but now, he had the heart to kill him. He was about to pull Han Yunxi's hand away when suddenly, he felt weak all over. He unconsciously took a step back and almost fell. Han Yunxi hurriedly pulled him and let him lean against the wall. However, once Long Fei Yi leaned against the wall, he really lost all his strength and slowly slid down the wall. Han Yunxi helped him sit down and said in a low voice, "Sorry, you'll be able to recover in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea." Without a doubt, Han Yunxi pushed him just now, not to push him away, but to poison him. "Han Yunxi, you actually dare to poison this prince?" Long Fei Yi's anger soared to the heavens. His voice was so cold that it penetrated people's hearts. Even though his body was weak, the murderous aura he emitted still made people tremble. Han Yunxi only pretended not to hear and avoided his murderous gaze. She turned and rushed into the room. Seeing this, the surrounding hidden guards were all stunned. They never thought that there would be someone in this world who could so easily injure the Duke of Qin. The leader of the hidden guards hurried forward and respectfully knelt by Long Fei Yi's side. He asked in a low voice, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this door, should it be closed again, or should it be left open?" If it wasn't closed, the Tang clan seal array would be broken. If it was closed, Qin Wangfei would undoubtedly die inside. The hidden guard did not dare to ask, but Long Fei Yi naturally understood what the hidden guard meant. He weakly leaned against the wall and glanced into the room from the corner of his eyes. He did not answer the hidden guard for a long time. The hidden guard lowered his head and bent his waist, trying to figure out if His Highness Duke of Qin did not hear him or if he did not want the answer. Or perhaps, he was considering whether to close the door or not. The hidden guard waited for a while, but Long Fei Yi still ignored him. If this continued, the person inside would come out soon. Thus, the hidden guard gathered his courage and asked again, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this door." Finally, Long Fei Yi looked at the hidden guard. The hidden guard was overjoyed and waited for his answer. Who knew that Qin Wangfei would look at him with a cold gaze and still not answer? The hidden guard's scalp went numb from Qin Wangfei's gaze. When he heard the sounds of fighting coming closer and closer to the door, he had no choice but to stand up and close the door. No matter what, he had to close the door first. The fighting inside would not end so quickly, and the hidden weapons of the Tang clan's hidden guards would not come out so quickly. Unexpectedly, just as the hidden guard was about to close the door, Long Fei Yi immediately shouted, "Scram!" The hidden guard was so frightened that his hands trembled. He hurriedly pushed the door open, looking extremely innocent. The door opened just like that. Long Fei Yi sat paralyzed in the doorway, watching. The time it took to brew a cup of tea was almost up. Although the sounds of fighting were close by, there was still no sign of Han Yunxi or Gu Qishao. Even Gu Qishao couldn't come out, much less Jun Ishia's poison humans. The cold aura around Long Fei Ye's body grew thicker and thicker, and his cold eyes slowly narrowed. Han Yunxi, you damned woman. Are you coming out or not? You have the ability to barge in, but you don't have the ability to come out. Or perhaps you're using your own life to force your lordship to release Gu Qishao. Time trickled by. Finally, Long Fei looked towards the leader of the guards, who gave a start and didn't dare to move a muscle. However, just as Long Fei Yi was about to speak, a red shadow flashed past. Gu flew out with Han Yunxi in his arms. Gu's shoulder had been hit by a dart and was bleeding profusely. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, was safe and sound. They had just landed on the ground when several black shadows flew out after them. They were Jun Ishia's poison men. The Tang clan's hidden guards immediately chased after them. The Tang clan's sealing array had been broken. Han Yunxi had almost immediately struggled free of Gu's grip and rushed to Long Fei Ye's side. Even the Tang clan's hidden guards were not as fast as her. She knew very well just how potent the poison she had used was. Even if there was just a little bit of time left before Long Fei Yi would recover, at this moment, he still did not have the slightest bit of strength left in him. Right now, in such a chaotic situation, the completely weak Long Fei Yi was in the most danger. Han Yunxi protected Long Fei Yi with one hand, her other hand ready to release the pear blossom teardrop rain. Very quickly, the surrounding hidden guards had also surrounded Long Fei Yi in a circle while the other hidden guards continued to fight with the black-robed poison men. The entire scene was in a state of chaos. Gu pressed on the wound on his shoulder with one hand, his face as pale as a sheet. He stood outside the chaos and looked at Han Yunxi from afar, his lips holding a rare trace of helplessness. Just a moment ago, this woman had disregarded everything and rushed in to look for him. But at this moment, she had disregarded everything and rushed to another man's side to protect him. Han Yunxi, what should this young master do with you? At the same time, Long Fei Yi was in the center of the circle of protection and was also outside the chaos. His cold gaze pierced through the chaotic killing, directly towards Gu. Seeing this, Gu retracted the trace of helplessness from the corners of his mouth and replacing it with still that frivolous yet devastatingly beautiful smile. He laughed loudly, "Poison lass, you've already risked your life to save me, why aren't you leaving with me? You should consider it carefully. I'll look for you again 3 days later." After he finished speaking, he turned around and fled. Han Yunxi was already sick of hearing these words and treated it as Gu being frivolous and joking around. She didn't take it to heart as her attention was still on the surrounding danger. It was her who had caused Long Fei Yi to be so weak. If by any chance something happened to Long Fei Yi, she wouldn't be able to atone for her crime even if she died. Who knew that Long Fei Yi would instead ask cold, "Qin Wangfei, are you two intending to elope?" Han Yunxi instantly quivered as she realized that she was Long Fei Ye's official consort and Gu had just taken liberties with her in front of Long Fei Yi. Chapter 244. Elope? How could that be possible? Goo, that damned bastard. So be it if he escaped, but he actually framed her like this. Han Yunxi, who had been extremely daring just a moment ago, wilted at this moment. She smiled and said, "Your Highness misunderstands. Goo was just joking." Joking? Can you get physical with a joke? Long Fei Yi questioned coldly. Get physical with a joke? Han Yunxi pondered for a long time, but she just couldn't figure out where Long Fei Yi had come up with such a phrase. Your Highness, is there some misunderstanding? Joking? Can you feed him pastries if you're joking? Long Fei Yi asked again. This time, Han Yunxi finally understood and exclaimed, "You've been following us all this time." No wonder he came in such a timely manner and was so well prepared. It turned out that he had been hiding in the shadows all this time. He knew everything. Answer this prince's question. Long Fei Yi's anger soared to the heavens. Even though there was killing all around him, he didn't take it to heart. Why are you following us? Han Yunxi didn't answer but asked instead. She was also angry. Han Yunxi, you actually dared to poison this prince for Goo. You're so capable. Long Fei Yi sneered. The trace of contempt in his eyes was especially irritating to Han Yunxi. She hurriedly explained, "There's really nothing going on between me and Goo. I was just asking him for help." Before she could finish speaking, Long Fei Yi interrupted, "Whether or not there's anything going on between you and him has nothing to do with this prince." For a moment, Han Yunxi was stunned and confused. If it had nothing to do with him, then why was he throwing a tantrum here? Han Yunxi suddenly quieted down and stared at Long Fei Yi. This guy, could it be that he's jealous? Han Yunxi looked and guessed. Suddenly, she wasn't so angry anymore. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "Long Fei Yi, what do you mind?" Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi also spoke at the same time. Han Yunxi, since you're Qin Wangfei now, I'll have to trouble you to behave properly. Otherwise, you'll bear the consequences. The two spoke at the same time. After speaking, they both fell into silence. The two of them did not speak again. Their eyes met, and they allowed the killing to rage around them. Hidden weapons flew around them, and they formed a quiet world of their own. But very soon, Han Yunxi broke the silence. She thought that she was overthinking things. Of course Long Fei minded. He'd always treated her as a woman under his name, but that was all. His domineering attitude, his mind, his kiss, his words, "I won't exchange it for anything," were all because she was under his name. Just like the things under his name, she was his. He could do whatever he wanted and absolutely wouldn't allow anyone else to possess her. That was all. Your Highness, you've misunderstood. There's nothing between me and Goo. I just happened to run into him when I was in trouble, so I asked him for help. Your Highness should also know that without the antidote, the Crown Prince will die and it will be difficult for this concubine to survive. Han Yunxi explained frankly. In fact, she had ample reasons to look for Goo. Luo Zuishan needed Goo to deal with, didn't he? However, she wouldn't say it. This was related to Goo's secret. Although Goo had never asked her to keep anything secret, she knew that it would be tantamount to betraying him. Long Fei Yi didn't speak for a long time. Instead, it was Han Yunxi who said something shocking. If your Highness feels that this concubine is incompetent as a Wang Fei in name, you can divorce this concubine. She really couldn't bear to be called a woman who didn't abide by her virtue. Back then, the Empress Dowager had decreed their marriage, so he could divorce her. But if Long Fei Yi wanted to divorce her now, the Empress Dowager and Emperor Tianhui would definitely approve of it. As she spoke, Han Yunxi felt a faint ache in her heart. Still, she looked calmly at Long Fei Yi without avoiding his gaze. Han Yunxi, would like someone very much, very much. But she would never wrong herself, much less lose herself. Now that she'd said this, she waited for Long Fei Yi to give her a straightforward answer. Unexpectedly, the weak Long Fei Yi suddenly scooped Han Yunxi up and wrapped his arms tightly around her neck. He lowered his head and sealed her mouth with a fierce kiss. Immerse, Han Yunxi didn't expect this at all. Her first reaction was to struggle, but the more she struggled, the angrier Long Fei Yi became. He used more force and deepened the kiss. Just like at the Duke of Qin's estate, he'd done the same. But this time, it was even more sudden and fierce. Han Yunxi couldn't even bear it, much less struggle. This ruthless man was simply robbing her. In the end, she was almost out of breath before he finally released her. But he didn't release her completely, instead pressing his lips against hers and panting with her. Han Yunxi, since you walked into my door of your own accord, even if you die in this lifetime, you can only die at the Duke of Qin's estate. There's no need to say such laughable things as divorcing your wife in the future. This man was simply a devil when he spoke such heartless words with such a heart-stirring and coarse gasp. When he finished, he finally let go of Han Yunxi completely, allowing Han Yunxi to fall to the ground and collapse against the wall. Her entire body was in a daze. Her delicate lips were swollen and her face was pale. At this moment, the fighting and the surroundings had already stopped. The black-robed poison men had suffered heavy casualties and many of them had escaped. Tang Li stood far away as he looked at Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi in shock. It was only when Long Fei Yi walked in front of him that he regained his senses and softly exclaimed, just now his eyes weren't playing tricks on him, right? This fellow had just kissed Han Yunxi in front of everyone. This cold and unfeeling fellow actually knew how to kiss a woman. And for such a long time. Could it be that he was really serious? Receiving a kiss from the Duke of Qin, what kind of feeling was that? Damn it. Tang Li realized that as a man, it wasn't appropriate for him to consider this question. Where's Jun Yixie? Long Fei Yi asked. He and Tang Li had brought the Tang clan's sealing formation with them mainly to capture Jun Yixie. Of course, using it on Gu wasn't out of the plan either. Jun Yixie had been poisoned by Han Yunxi and the pear blossom rain needles, so Tang Li should be able to handle it. Tang Li finally regained his senses and hastily replied, he was saved by a white-robed woman. That woman's sword skills are very impressive. It's very similar to Tianshan Kenzo's style. Tianshan Kenzo was as famous as Shu Mountain's Tang clan. Long Fei Yi's sword skills had been trained by Tianshan Kenzo. Tang Li's words were clearly hinting at something, but Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. He only instructed in a low voice, get ready, get ready. We'll enter the poison sect tonight. Strike first and gain the upper hand. What? Tang Li exclaimed. Strike first and gain the upper hand. So Long Fei Yi meant that they weren't going to scout tonight, but to steal the poison beast. What's wrong with this guy? Did he need to be in such a rush? The Mu clan hadn't delivered the medicine yet, so the poison beast was still unconscious. It was very dangerous to go in rashly. Long Fei Yi didn't even look back as he walked away. Han Yunxi watched him silently from behind, expressionless. Tang Li hesitated for a moment before walking over to Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi gently wiped away the lingering trace of ambiguity at the corner of her mouth and straightened her clothes as if nothing had happened. However, the heaviness in her eyes betrayed her. Cough cough. Jun Yixie was saved by a white-robed woman again. What a pity. Tang Li was purely trying to find something to talk about. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi said mildly, don't worry, no one but me will be able to cure the poison in his arm this time. He'll come again. The first few times had been too rushed. This time, Han Yunxi had enough time to poison Jun Yixia with the help of the poison pond's water. Naturally, she'd leave a way out. Tang Li was surprised. "You're not stupid after all." Han Yunxi rolled her eyes at him but didn't say anything. She seemed to be full of thoughts and tired as she silently turned to leave. Tang Li was conflicted. Should he tell Han Yunxi about the poison beast or not? Although this woman's martial arts weren't good, her poison skills were top-notch. If Long Fei Yi really wanted to go on an adventure and bring this woman along, it would be like having an extra protective talisman. But why didn't Long Fei Yi tell her just now? Could it be that he didn't plan on letting her go? Tang Li found that he couldn't see through these two people anymore. He was conflicted for a while, but still didn't dare to tell Han Yunxi. He only silently watched Han Yunxi leave. After Han Yunxi walked far away, the hidden guard commander came forward and respectfully reported, "Young master, Qin Wangfei used a hidden weapon to kill 2 of our hidden guards. That hidden weapon wasn't from our Tang sect, but it was very powerful." Upon hearing this, Tang Li wanted to bang his head against the wall. After a while, he calmed down and said in a low voice, "Don't spread this news, especially to my father, understand?" The hidden guard didn't understand, but he immediately nodded his head. Han Yunxi walked aimlessly on the street and finally returned to the medical school. Luo Zuishan had been waiting in her courtyard for half a day. "Where's Gu?" Han Yunxi was very downcast, her voice muffled. Luo Zuishan had clearly been warned by Gu. When facing Han Yunxi, he didn't have his previous cunning and treacherous attitude. "He told you to wait. He said that he would definitely come and take you away before midnight tomorrow." Luo Zuishan felt awkward saying those words himself, but they were Gu Qishao's exact words. When would that guy be a little more serious? She felt very powerless. When she thought about how Long Tianma was incurable, she felt even more powerless. She didn't take these words to heart and just casually nodded. Seeing Han Yunxi nod, Luo Zuishan didn't take it seriously. Gu's words were a big joke in his eyes. He didn't know that Han Yunxi hadn't cured Long Tianma's poison yet. What he needed to do now was to follow Gu's instructions and tell Han Yunxi about Shi Yuba planting Gu in Long Tianma. In any case, the public consultation had already been cancelled. The 3 elders wouldn't allow news of the Gu to spread, so they'd only punish Shi Yuba severely. Qin Wangfei, guess what happened to Tianning's crown prince's old illness? Luo Zuishan smiled mysteriously. But Han Yunxi had already lost interest in this topic. Right now, she was more concerned about Long Tianma's life and death. Tomorrow night was the deadline for the agreed-upon time. There was no hope of curing Long Tianma's poison by then. Based on the detox system's calculations from yesterday, Long Tianma only had 10 days left without an antidote. No matter how hard she tried to delay the bone poison's outbreak, Long Tianma would still die in 8 days. Leaving the mysterious Luo Zuishan to dry on one side, Han Yunxi suddenly rose to leave. She had to find Gu Beiyue, who shared her fate. Chapter 245. In the dead of night, the bright moon hung high in the sky. All of Medical City seemed to be draped in a veil of moonlight as everything fell into a deep sleep. Medical City was shaped like the 8 trigrams. The Medical Academy was at the center of Medical City, backed by the tallest mountain in Medical City, called Lotus Mountain. This mountain had 5 peaks that looked like a lotus flower about to bloom. Each peak was abnormally steep, with only one path leading up and down. It was carved into the cliff like a staircase to the heavens, and the stone steps were extremely narrow. Only one person could pass at a time. In the era when the medical sect and poison sect coexisted, the medical academy belonged to the medical sect before and the poison sect behind. This Lotus Mountain belonged to the poison sect. Now, the entire medical academy belonged to the medical sect. Lotus Mountain was the only place that no one dared to enter. It was sealed off as a forbidden area for the medical academy, and the older generation privately called it the poison sect's forbidden area. Legend had it that Lotus Mountain was filled with poisonous gas all year round. Birds, beasts, and even plants were all exterminated. It was a dead mountain. Legend had it that Lotus Mountain was filled with the vengeful spirits of the poison sect. Every night, cries would rise and fall. Legend had it that the poison sect had left behind a storehouse of poisonous plants in Lotus Mountain. Over the years, the plants had grown wildly, filling the entire mountain range with poison. Legends were both true and false, but Long Fei Yi was certain that the poison beast Gu Shu was trapped in the sky pit in the middle of the 5 peaks. Entering the sky pit at night, and the poison sect sky pit at that, was the craziest thing to do. Tang Li tried to persuade him the entire way, but Long Fei Yi remained unmoved. By now, the two of them had already avoided the medical academy's heavy defenses and were standing at the edge of the sky pit in the middle of the 5 peaks. They'd only explored up to the edge of the sky pit, but tonight, Long Fei Yi wasn't just going to enter the sky pit, he was also going to take the poison beast away. At this point, Tang Li finally turned serious. Long Fei Yi, does it have to be tonight? Their original plan was to wait a few days and follow the medical academy's people inside. They'd wait until the poison beast was drugged and unconscious before making their move. Long Fei Yi nodded. He took out a pair of silver gloves from his sleeve and tossed one to Tang Li. Tang Li caught it and looked at it. He was dumbfounded. You're serious? The silver silk gloves were a treasure that was immune to poison. As long as one wore the gloves, they would be fine even if they came into contact with any poison. Tang Li grew up with Long Fei Yi, but he had only seen this pair of gloves once. Long Fei Yi's birth mother had left him 2 things. One was the silver thread glove, and the other was the perplexing butterfly illusion kept by Han Yunxi. Unless it was a matter of life and death, Long Fei Yi would never take out the gloves so easily. Long Fei Yi calmly said, according to Duke Wang's understanding, the terrain below is very complicated. It's like a maze with hundreds of hidden traps. Don't be careless. Tang Li shook his head. Long Fei Yi, it's not too late to find Han Yunxi now. You're wasting God's gift by not using a woman like that. Long Fei Yi didn't answer. He put on the silver thread glove and said indifferently, she doesn't know martial arts. She's a burden. Tang Li glanced at the heaven pit and sighed helplessly. It's quite dangerous to come here without knowing martial arts. Let's go. Long Fei Yi didn't continue the topic. He jumped down, and his black figure quickly disappeared into the night like a ghost. Tang Li immediately gathered his thoughts and followed. Although his body was whiter than snow, it was quickly swallowed up by the darkness of the heaven pit. Not long after Long Fei Yi and Tang Li entered the heaven pit, 2 figures flew out from the surrounding forest, accompanied by crisp laughter. The newcomers were a man and a woman. They were none other than Gu and Mu Linger, the genius pharmacist of Medicine City's Mu clan. It was impossible to see the injury on Gu's shoulder. His red robes were as luxurious as ever, and he was as enchanting as a spider lily blooming in the night. Mu Linger's smile was especially mischievous. Her iconic pair of large eyes seemed to gather the spirit of water from all over the world, making her unforgettable. This time, Medicine City and Medical City had joined forces to seal the poison beast. The medicine provided by the Mu clan was the main force, and the Wang and Xia clans were the support. Mu Linger was not only responsible for delivering the medicine to the head of the medical academy, but also assisting the doctors in administering the medicine to the poison beast. This was the first family-level mission she had accepted. At this time, she was supposed to deliver the medicine to the head of the medical academy, but instead, she snuck out to see her sweetheart, Gu. As headstrong as she was, she had long grown tired of the restraints of her clan. The position of head of the clan was not a temptation to her, but rather a burden. Being able to be together with Chi brother was the happiest thing in her life. Chi brother, why are you stealing the poison beast? Even now, Mulinger still couldn't figure out Gu Chishao's motives. Many people in the world were coveting this poison beast, but none of them knew that it wasn't easy to control it. If they made a mistake, they'd be devoured by it and die a horrible death. Gu stared at the frighteningly dark heaven pit and didn't answer for a long time. Chi brother, I'm asking you a question. Mulinger pushed him. Gu came back to his senses and smiled. I'll kill it and make a stew. You can have a sip. Just a sip. Stingy. Mulinger pouted. Her delicate appearance was cute and charming. Unfortunately, Gu was absent-minded. He took out a map from his sleeve and carefully studied it under the moonlight. Mulinger blinked her big eyes, smiled slyly, and asked jokingly, I heard that your sweetheart is also in the medical city. How much do you plan to give her? Last time at the inn, Chi brother looked at Han Yunxi differently. He also said that he had someone in his heart. Mulinger was still brooding about it. She really hoped that Chi brother was joking. She thought that Chi brother wouldn't answer her boring question, but Gu immediately looked back and smiled like a devil. Give her as much as she wants. As soon as these words came out, Mulinger's good mood instantly became gloomy. Her unhappiness was written all over her face. Unfortunately, Gu didn't pay much attention to it. He was thinking about the map and muttering something to himself. Mulinger sulked for a long time and stamped her feet several times. Seeing that Gu still ignored her, she was about to cry. However, even so, she didn't throw a tantrum and took the initiative to approach him. Anyway, even if she threw a tantrum, Chi brother never coaxed her. She would feel embarrassed if she didn't have a way out. Seeing the map in Gu's hand, Mulinger was shocked. How did you get this? I stole it. Gu admitted frankly. According to Mulinger's knowledge, there were hundreds of poisonous traps in the sinkhole. These traps were not set by the medical school, but were originally there. If someone accidentally touched them, they wouldn't even know how they died. However, the dean of the medical school had a map of the sinkhole. According to the map, they could smoothly reach the secret room at the bottom. Are you serious? How did you steal it? Mulinger leaned closer. However, she had never seen the map before and couldn't tell whether it was real or fake. Is there anything in the world that Chi brother can't do? Gu asked cheerfully. No. Mulinger also smiled. In fact, she didn't know much about Chi brother. However, in her opinion, there wasn't so much to know about a person. It was fine as long as they were happy together. Gu seemed to be in a good mood. He stretched out his hand and put it around Mulinger's shoulder. Let's go. I'll give you a mouthful of soup when we catch the poisonous beast. Judging from Gu Chishao's expression, they looked like brother and sister with their arms around each other's shoulders. Mulinger felt as sweet as if she'd eaten honey. She thought, if Chi Gij was willing to take me to wander the Jianghu freely and unfettered, even if I had to abandon the Mu clan and change my name, I'd be willing. Soon, Gu and Mulinger's figures also disappeared into the darkness of the sinkhole. The seemingly peaceful sinkhole had already been filled with crises. At this time, the medical school was also in a state of chaos. Han Yunxi looked for Gu Beiyue for the whole afternoon but couldn't find him. Someone said that they saw him go out, but no one knew where he went. In the evening, Han Yunxi looked for him again, but still couldn't find him. When she returned to her room, she saw Luo Zuishan pacing back and forth at the door, as if there was something urgent. Director Luo, what's the matter? Han Yunxi asked suspiciously. When Luo Zuishan saw Han Yunxi, it was as if he had seen a life-saving straw. Qin Wangfei, you're finally back. Something bad has happened. What happened to Gu Beiyue? Han Yunxi was frightened. She had asked Luo Zuishan this question during the day. Something happened to Qi, something big happened. Luo Zuishan was so anxious that his face was deathly pale. Qi, Gu. Han Yunxi was even more puzzled. Alas. You. Luo Zuishan was anxious, but he didn't know what to say. The dean's map of the sinkhole had been lost, and the medical school's higher-ups were holding an emergency meeting. Although the news hadn't spread, Luo Zuishan was still able to find out with his connections. Others didn't know how the map had been lost, but Luo Zuishan didn't need to think with his toes to know that Gu had stolen it. He was 100% sure that Gu was in the sinkhole right now. If Gu wasn't in Medical City, then someone else could have stolen it. But as long as he was in Medical City, it had to be him. There was no mistaking it. He knew that the brat wouldn't come back for anything good, but he didn't expect him to come for the poison beast. Seeing Luo Zuishan's incoherent speech, Han Yunxi grew anxious. What happened? Gu stole the dean's map and went to the poison sect sinkhole to steal the poison beast. Luo Zuishan could only speak frankly. Before he met Han Yunxi, no one in the world could persuade Gu. He thought that the only person who could stop him now was Han Yunxi. He had to stop Gu before he got the poison beast out. That brat was filled with hatred for Medical City. It was fine if he didn't come back, but once he did, who knew what earth-shattering things he would do. Besides, even if he had the map, it was still very dangerous to steal the poison beast. Without the three great clans of Medicine City working together, even the dean and the others would have a hard time subduing the poison beast. That brat was practically throwing his life away. Sinkhole, poison beast. Han Yunxi was clueless about this. But after Luo Zuishan's concise explanation, Han Yunxi instantly understood what Gu's joke meant. He told her to wait for him until tomorrow night. Tomorrow night was the deadline for her bet with Third Elder. He knew that she hadn't cured Long Tianma's bone poison, so he went to steal the poison beast. Its blood could cure 100 poisons. That damned guy, why didn't he bring me along? Although Han Yunxi cursed him, her heart felt warm. How could she not know how well Gu Qishao treated her? How could she not remember it in her heart? Let's go, take me to the sinkhole. Han Yunxi made a prompt decision. Hurry, we might be able to stop him. Luo Zuishan clung to his last hope. He hoped that Gu wouldn't have entered the sinkhole by the time they arrived. If Gu went down, then everything would be over. Sneaking into the poison sect's forbidden grounds was already a last resort. As for the sinkhole, he didn't dare, nor did he have the ability. Let's go. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with determination. The poison beast's blood was Long Tianma's only hope, as well as her and Gu Beiyue's last hope. She was determined to get it. Chapter 246. Thanks to his good relationship with Gu, Luo Zuishan was quite familiar with the poison sect's forbidden grounds. He led Han Yunxi along a small path as they hurried towards the sky pit. They ran into a few guards along the way, but fortunately, they made it through safely. By the time they reached the sky pit, it was almost dawn. In the meager light of dawn, the sky pit looked like a giant volcanic crater. It was filled with lush green vines. It didn't look like much from a distance, but Han Yunxi couldn't help but suck in a cold breath when she poked her head over the edge. The sky pit was so deep that she couldn't see the bottom. Even light couldn't penetrate it. After looking at it for a long time, one would think that it was a black hole that could suck everything in. Han Yunxi's attention was on the sky pit, but Luo Zuishan couldn't find Gu anywhere. He sent out a few strange signals, but there was no response. It's already this time, he should have gone down, Han Yunxi said mildly. Luo Zuishan panicked and hurried forward to send signals into the sky pit. Unfortunately, there wasn't even an echo, much less a response. Luo Zuishan was anxious, but he was still rational. He looked around and said without hesitation, "Let's go, quickly." Since they couldn't stop Gu in time, they could only take things one step at a time. Now that they'd lost the map, the medical academy's higher-ups would definitely tighten their defenses after the meeting. There hadn't been so many guards on the small path before, but there were clearly more now. Who knew what other precautions the medical academy's higher-ups would take after the meeting? The entire sky pit might be surrounded. If they didn't leave now and were caught red-handed, they wouldn't be able to clear their names even if they jumped into the Yellow River. Leave. Han Yunxi didn't want to leave, but the situation here was much worse than she'd imagined. There was no way down from such a big sky pit. If they wanted to go down, they'd have to leap through the air. For someone who didn't know martial arts, this situation was very dangerous. Han Yunxi really hated this body. She couldn't cultivate internal energy, so she couldn't even learn Qigong. What a piece of trash. Qin Wangfei, don't look anymore. Let's hurry up and think of another way. Luo Zuishan urged. Han Yunxi was reluctant to leave, but she had to go. It was impossible for her to go down with her own strength. This damned Gu, why didn't he bring her along when there was such a wonderful thing? Let's go. Of course, Han Yunxi was also very decisive. She decided to ask Tang Li for help. As for that domineering and unreasonable guy, she did not even want to see him for the time being. Han Yunxi and Luo Zuishan were just about to leave when a white figure suddenly appeared in front of them out of thin air. The two of them were startled, but when they focused, they realized it was a masked man. His entire body was covered in only one color, snow-white robes, a white mask, and a white jade hairpin that held up his hair. Other than that, there were no other decorations. The first rays of dawn appeared on the horizon and shone from behind the white-robed man, coating him in a faint layer of gold. In that moment, Han Yunxi seemed to see an archangel descending from the heavens. But she quickly recovered her senses and marveled at the white-robed man's speed. It felt like he'd appeared out of thin air. Their surroundings were so empty, but she really hadn't seen where he'd come from. White and black masks were the same. They came with ill intentions. But Han Yunxi couldn't sense any malice from this man. It wasn't until Luo Zuishan spoke that she recovered her senses. Who are you? How dare you trespass on my poison sect's forbidden grounds? Luo Zuishan rebuked him like a master. The white-robed man's eyes were like a 1,000-year lake, quiet and reserved. He ignored Luo Zuishan, but bowed to Han Yunxi. Miss Yunxi, I've offended you. Miss Yunxi. Han Yunxi almost didn't realize he was addressing her. She'd been married as soon as she transmigrated, so she'd long had nothing to do with the word miss. Gu often called her Glass, which made her feel awkward. Now here came someone who called her Miss. Since this white-robed man knew her name, he had to have some understanding of her. Why did he call her that? But Han Yunxi had no time to consider this question, because the white-robed man had appeared behind Han Yunxi as soon as he finished speaking. He grabbed her by the shoulders. 1 second, he was clearly in front of her, but the next, he was behind her. How powerful did his lightness skills have to be to achieve this kind of speed? What do you want to do? Han Yunxi didn't even have time to use her poison needles before the man's feet tapped the ground. In a flash, he'd retreated with Han Yunxi to the air above the sky pit. This was great. Han Yunxi was about to make her move, but had no choice but to withdraw the needle she'd hidden on her finger. Right now, the two of them were high above the sky pit. If anything happened to this white-robed man and he accidentally let go, she'd definitely fall to her death. Since she couldn't break free, Han Yunxi was too lazy to waste any more energy. She calmly asked, "Are you going to take me down there?" Since this man knew her and had kidnapped her here, he had to have a favor to ask of her. He was aiming for her poison skills. "I'll have to trouble Miss Yunxi to open a path for this one. If I've offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me." The white-robed man was still very polite. "How can I forgive you? You'll give me half of the poison beast you catch." Han Yunxi smiled. But the white-robed man didn't even think, but simply replied, "All right. Then how can I trust you?" Han Yunxi asked again. This time, the white-robed man's answer exceeded Han Yunxi's expectations. He smiled as well. "Even if Miss Yunxi doesn't believe me, you have to believe me." So speaking, he tightened his grip on Han Yunxi's shoulder and moved as fast as lightning. His figure flashed by like a shadow as he disappeared into the darkness of the sky pit. "Qin Wangfei!" Luo Zuishan cried out anxiously. He wanted to take another look, but he couldn't. It was over. If Gu found out that he'd brought Han Yunxi here to be kidnapped, Gu would probably beat his old bones to death. Luo Zuishan was so anxious that he didn't know what to do. Without a choice, he could only return to the medical academy first. As Luo Zuishan predicted, it wasn't long before the entire sky pit was surrounded by guards, both to prevent trespassers and those who'd already entered from leaving. The people who'd entered the sky pit were already scattered throughout the maze-like underground caverns filled with hundreds of poison traps. Right now, they had no time to worry about the situation above the sky pit. Han Yunxi was brought all the way to the caverns by the white-robed man. As soon as they touched down, Han Yunxi viciously stomped at the man's foot. She felt that her speed was already very fast, but who knew that the white-robed man was even faster than her? He actually dodged her foot. He, Han Yunxi turned to look with a fake smile. The white-robed man looked at her, but didn't get angry. "Miss Yunxi, let's go." Han Yunxi nodded. She pretended to be careless as she reached out to brush back her scattered hair. It was this movement that sent a poison needle flying towards the white-robed man's face. But the white-robed man actually caught the needle with his hand. Although they were very close, his movements were so fast that Han Yunxi didn't even see the process, only the result. Despite being ambushed a second time, the white-robed man didn't get angry. He even gave the needle back to Han Yunxi. "Back to you." Han Yunxi curled her lips. She didn't even spare it a glance. This was simply an insult to her assassination weapon. Just how much did this white-robed man understand about her? Why did he seem to know her every move so well? Just who was he? And why did he call her Miss Yunxi? "Miss Yunxi, let's go this way." There were 3 paths in front of them that led into the unknown darkness. The white-robed man chose the rightmost path and took out a night pearl to illuminate the way. Didn't they say they'd let her lead the way? He'd chosen his own path. "Why are we taking this path?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. She'd long activated the detox system and hadn't detected any traces of poison. Perhaps there were no poison traps at the entrance, or perhaps there were poisons here that the detox system couldn't resolve. She cherished her life, so she was very cautious. Intuition, the white-robed man smiled warmly. "Let's go, we won't be wrong." Han Yunxi assumed that he'd push her to the front to be in danger, but he actually walked in front and shielded her behind him. Wasn't this the best chance to launch a sneak attack? Han Yunxi had already taken out her poison needles, but hesitated before putting them away. "Forget it, let's see what this fellow wants to do first." She was certain that he hadn't brought her down here simply to lead the way. They hadn't walked far into the rightmost cave when Han Yunxi's detox system gave off its first warning. There was snake venom 300 meters ahead of them. Judging from the nature of the snake venom, it was a living poison. In other words, there were poisonous snakes 300 meters ahead of them, and there were quite a few of them. Han Yunxi was about to warn the white-robed man when he suddenly stopped and groped around on the wall. It wasn't clear what secret button he'd touched, but a stone door suddenly opened up in the wall beside them. Behind the door was another pitch-black path with no end in sight. "Hey, you know the way!" Han Yunxi exclaimed, her tone filled with anger. The white-robed man was as gentle as ever. Even through the veil, she could feel his faint smile as he said, "Miss Yunxi, you can choose to walk on your own or follow me. Just why did you bring me down here? You're lying to me." Han Yunxi demanded. Didn't he say he wanted her to lead the way? Wasn't he aiming for her poison skills? "Come with me, you'll understand," the white-robed man said again. "You!" Han Yunxi fumed. This fellow was simply playing word games with her. He was certain she wouldn't leave, but still gave her a choice. The white-robed man walked through the stone door first, then walked further and further away without looking back. He really didn't wait for Han Yunxi. What exactly did this guy want from her? Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes. She hesitated before quickly chasing after him. "Fine, I'll go with him." "Who's afraid of who?" The white-robed man glanced back at her without any wariness. Chapter 247. Han Yunxi followed behind the white-robed man. Along the way, her detox system detected quite a few poisons, but the white-robed man avoided them in advance, turning here and there as he opened countless hidden doors. She was certain that this white-robed man knew the way. Who the hell is this guy? Was he someone from the medical academy? Or was he a remnant of the poison sect? There were rumors that there were still remnants of the poison sect in Medical City. What was his motive for bringing her down to the sky pit? Han Yunxi's side was going smoothly, but Gu's side wasn't going so well at all since he had the map. They had been careless because they thought they had the map. If not for Gu's superb poison skills and Mu Ling, or as many drugs that could subdue the poisonous insects, they would have lost their lives long ago. They had just escaped from the densely packed cave of king cobras. Gu's right arm had been bitten to the point that it was covered in cuts and bruises. His originally bright red robes were soaked in blood, looking gory and terrifying. Mu Ling wasn't much better off. Her back had been bitten several times, and her entire back was soaked in blood. It was impossible to tell the original color of her robes. Her martial arts were too weak, so she couldn't protect herself. Even if Gu did his best to protect her, he was powerless against such a terrifying poison trap. After all, the hundreds of poison traps here had been set up by the poison sect. All the poisons in the world originated from the poison sect, so it was obvious how dangerous they were. The snake cave had been densely packed with king cobras. There were so many of them that even Gu and Mu Ling didn't have enough time to deal with them all, even with their drugs. There wasn't even a place to stand or a handrail in the snake cave. Not only did they have to avoid the king cobra's attacks, they also had to find a way out of the snake-filled walls. For a moment, Mu Ling had almost given up. She thought that if she wasn't with seventh brother, she would definitely give up. The only fortunate thing was that the king cobra in the snake cave was a very common species, and Mu Linger had enough antidotes to detoxify it. By now, they'd already taken the antidote. Gu Qishao was as tired as a corpse and had no energy left in him as he lay on the ground. Mu Linger was exhausted as well and wished she could just fall asleep and never wake up. After some time, Mu Linger finally spoke. "Qi brother, where did you get the map in your hand? Were you cheated? If this map was real, they should have already successfully passed through the cave maze and avoided the hundreds of poison traps." They should have seen the poisonous beast by now. However, they were trapped in the snake cave for half a day. Goose suddenly opened his eyes. His long and narrow eyes flashed with hostility. It was as if he had changed into a different person. He did not speak for a long time. Linger panicked and hurriedly crawled over. "Chi brother, what's wrong with you?" Gu took out the map and threw it away without even looking at it. There was no doubt that this map was fake. As for whether the real map had been stolen by someone else in advance, or if the director himself had made a fake map to lure the enemy, this was not known. In short, Gu was in a bad mood. Linger looked at the map and frowned. "What should we do now? How terrifying would it be to enter the crater without a map?" Gu stood up, completely ignoring the bruises on his back. He helped Linger up. "There's not much time left. Let's continue forward." "There's not much time left." Linger didn't understand. She didn't know if Gu heard her question, but he didn't answer. Instead, he held Linger's hand and continued forward. "Chi brother, are you in a hurry?" Linger asked again. Unfortunately, Gu still didn't answer. Linger pouted and hesitated, but didn't ask again. Gu had the map in hand before, so his footsteps were light and light. He was so relaxed that he even whistled. But now, he had put away all his frivolous and unrestrained attitude. As he walked forward, he paid close attention to his surroundings to avoid falling into a second trap. The poison sect's 100 poison traps were indeed formidable, but he still believed in his own abilities. Just as Gu and Linger were about to leave the King Cobra cave, they heard footsteps nearby. Although the footsteps were light, they couldn't escape Gu's ears. "Someone's here." Gu Qishao lowered his voice and narrowed his eyes. Linger grew alarmed and asked hastily, "Why would someone come so early?" In the past, anyone who wanted to take the poison beast would follow Medical City's people here and make their move after the beast fell unconscious. "What's going on this year?" Hearing the footsteps approaching, Gu and Linger quickly hid in a small cave on the side. But soon enough, Gu heard a familiar voice. His narrowed eyes immediately shone with a sinister light. "Long Fei." His low voice was filled with self-satisfaction. He never expected Long Fei Yi to come as well. This was great, his chance for revenge had come. "Duke of Qin." Linger was surprised. Her first thought was whether Han Yunxi had come as well. Seeing Long Fei Yi and Tang Li drawing closer, Gu lowered his voice even further. "Linger, do you have any heat powder? What are you planning to do?" Linger was alarmed. Heat powder wasn't anything good. It was the equivalent of a stimulant. No matter if it was a human or an animal, they'd be instantly stimulated and have twice their usual energy. But once the effects wore off, the body would fall into a deep sleep for several days. "Do you have it?" Gu grew impatient. Linger quickly took it out. It was an entire bottle. But as soon as Gu accepted it, he silently scattered the powder into the cracks by his feet. After all, the King Cobra's den was right below this crack. They'd just stepped on a mechanism in front of them and fallen into the snake den. The cracks around them were left behind by the opening of the snake den. Heaven knows how ferocious Gu Qishao's usage of the medicine was. As soon as the heat powder entered the den, the densely packed vipers all stood up on their feet, gasping for breath as they flicked out their scarlet tongues. They were filled with endless attack power. Fortunately, it was dark here. Otherwise, even people like Linger and Gu who didn't have trypophobia would get goosebumps when they saw the scene below them. It was too terrifying. It was simply a world occupied by snakes. At this moment, Long Fei Yi had already stopped. The King Cobra's movements were so big that if he couldn't detect it, Long Fei Yi wouldn't be Long Fei Yi. There's a mechanism, Tangli said in a low voice. Snake. Long Fei Yi rubbed the silver wire glove on his right hand, looking cautious. Along the way, he and Tangli had encountered more than 10 hidden weapons and mechanisms, but they were not injured. This was all thanks to Long Fei Ye's caution and the silver wire glove that Long Fei Ye's biological mother had left behind. The two of them stopped at the same time, quietly listening to the movement in front of them. At the same time, Gu, who was hiding not far away, sneered sinisterly. He suddenly shouted, "Poison girl, be careful." As soon as he said that, Long Fei Yi flew forward like lightning. Tangli followed closely behind and shouted angrily, "Han Yunxi, where are you?" Unexpectedly, as soon as Long Fei reached the top of the den, Gu Qishao suddenly kicked out with his foot and pressed down on Long Fei's stomach, forcing him to sink deeper into the ground. Tangli was about to help, but Long Fei Yi said coldly, "You're looking for Han Yunxi." So speaking, he unsheathed the blood-red whip hidden at his waist and lashed it at Gu Qishao. Instantly, it wrapped around Gu Qishao's waist and didn't give him time to struggle. Even though he was sinking, he still pulled Gu Qishao down. In the darkness, Gu Qishao's smile was bewitching. He didn't struggle, but pressed himself against Long Fei even harder. Just like that, the two of them bumped into a trap and fell into the king cobra's den. As soon as they fell, the entire entrance was suddenly occupied by the king cobras. From afar, it looked like a pot of boiling snakes. Mu Ling, who was stunned at the sight, came to her senses and burst into tears. "Chi brother, those snakes have eaten the heat powder. Our medicine can't subdue them." Just now, they used medicine to deal with the king cobras in the snake cave. But now, these snakes had eaten the heat powder. Not only could the medicine not kill them, but it couldn't even make them unconscious. This cave full of poisonous snakes would probably go crazy. One could imagine how dangerous it was for the people who fell down. As soon as he saw Mu Ling, Tangli was stunned at first, then he came to his senses. "Why are you here?" Mu Ling didn't know who Tangli was. Tangli, on the other hand, had been paying attention to Mu Ling, the genius pharmacist, for a long time. This time, he was looking forward to seeing her concoct medicine to subdue the poisonous beast. Mu Ling couldn't care less about Tangli. She rushed out and jumped into the snake cave. Tangli didn't know how dangerous the snake cave was, and he didn't know what the heat powder Mu Ling mentioned was. He couldn't find Han Yunxi around, so he hurriedly chased after her. In the snake cave, the entangled poisonous snakes had already gone crazy. Like man-eating ants, they swallowed all the people who fell down at lightning speed. Suddenly, a sword light flashed, brightening the entire dark snake cave. In a corner of the snake cave, a large group of poisonous snakes was split open, and blood splattered everywhere. Long Fei Yi broke free from this large group of poisonous snakes. Just as he was about to escape, Goose suddenly pressed a hand on his shoulder and stopped him. "Where's Han Yunxi?" Long Fei Yi asked coldly. This guy still cared about that woman at a time like this? A complicated look flashed past Gu's eyes, but it quickly disappeared and was replaced by a ruthless ice. He said coldly, "Right here." Long Fei Yi, this young master doesn't care about integrity anymore. It's time for us to settle old scores. Kill without mercy, this young master knows how to do it too. Long Fei Yi, who was always suspicious, didn't doubt Gu's words. He suddenly shook. Not only did he shake off the poisonous snakes that pounced on him, he also shook off Gu at the same time. "Han Yunxi, where are you?" His voice was terrifyingly cold, but it revealed a rare anxiety. Gu was shaken far away. The poisonous snakes quickly pounced on him, but he ignored them. Instead, he grabbed a large group of poisonous snakes and threw them at Long Fei Yi. Chapter 248. Han Yunxi was here, but where was she? Why wasn't there any sound? If the person in front of him wasn't Gu, but someone else, Long Fei Yi might have been suspicious. Although there were many king cobras around, they were a very common species. This kind of poisonous snake shouldn't be a problem for Han Yunxi. She shouldn't be in danger. However, the person in front of him was Gu. This made Long Fei Yi anxious without thinking too much. Han Yunxi and Gu went to the crater to find the poisonous beast's blood. This was completely possible. Long Fei Yi's back shook. His internal energy burst out and fiercely shook off Gu's hand that was pressing on his shoulder. He was so irritable that he didn't even notice it. Where is she? Unexpectedly, Gu laughed. She's still in the medical school. Gu, you dare to deceive this prince. Long Fei Yi said angrily. The number of times he was deceived in his life could be counted on one hand. This was considered the first time. It's this young master's honor. Gu was in a very good mood. Long Fei Yi, quickly leave. These snakes have been drugged. Tang Li immediately shouted when he heard that Han Yunxi wasn't here. He fell to the side, a little away from Long Fei Yi and Gu. Facing the densely packed poisonous snakes, he couldn't use any of the hidden weapons he had secretly hidden. Fortunately, he had the silver thread gloves that Long Fei Yi gave him. He could still deal with these poisonous snakes with his bare hands. However, there were too many poisonous snakes, and they were too fierce. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to hold on. Han Yunxi wasn't here. Of course, they had to leave immediately. Gu had only seen Tang Li once. He didn't know who he was. He only thought that he was Long Fei Yi's personal bodyguard. He completely ignored Tang Li's existence. Long Fei Yi, I'll let you have a taste of death. As Gu spoke, he suddenly ignored the poisonous snakes around him and allowed them to bite him. He used his hands to scatter 2 handfuls of white powder on Long Fei Yi's body. It wasn't that Long Fei Yi couldn't dodge it, but he didn't expect Gu to cut off all means of retreat. He didn't care about being bitten by the venomous snake and used both hands. How much hatred did this guy have for him? Was it worth taking such a big risk? Although the king cobra's venom would not take effect so quickly, once the venom exceeded a certain range, it would be too late even if there was an antidote. Of course, Long Fei Yi didn't have the energy to think so much at this moment. Although he immediately dodged, he was still stained with quite a bit of the white powder. God knows what this white powder was. Once he was stained with it, his body emitted a strange fragrance that he could not get rid of. Long Fei Yi's only weakness was the venom. In this environment, he couldn't gain the upper hand at all. As soon as the scent wafted through the air, the irascible king cobras swarmed towards Long Fei like a swarm of bees. They even ignored Gu Qishao and Tang Li, who were also in the den. Long Fei Yi's reaction was also fast. He immediately jumped into the air to ensure the safety of his feet. At the same time, he waved his sword in a circle. The sword light immediately repelled a circle of venomous snakes around him. But soon, the venomous snakes behind him pounced. Above his head, the venomous snakes hung down. Under his feet, there were layers of venomous snakes. The top layer of venomous snakes stood upright. Around him, there were countless of them. They were densely packed together and formed a cylindrical shape, surrounding Long Fei Yi. One could imagine how terrifying it was to be attacked by thousands of venomous snakes in a dark and damp underground cave. There were snakes in all directions. With blood-red tongues and white fangs, Long Fei Yi had no way to retreat. Long Fei Yi couldn't stop. He could only continuously wave his sword light to repel the venomous snakes that were close to him. The venomous snakes that were in a frenzy didn't know fear. In other words, no matter how Long Fei Yi dealt with these venomous snakes, unless all the venomous snakes were destroyed, the attacks would always be there. However, one had to admit that Long Fei Ye's swordsmanship was very powerful. His sword chi was like a rainbow. One sword move had the power to topple mountains and overturn seas. Although he couldn't get away, the venomous snakes couldn't get close to him. Circle after circle of sword light, the venomous snakes were repelled and blood splattered. On the side, Gu leaned against the wall and watched with great interest. He caught a live venomous snake and skinned it. His hands were dripping with blood. After skinning the snake alive, he reached into the venomous snake's mouth and elegantly pulled out 2 of its fangs. When the fangs fell, the venom hidden in the roots of the fangs flowed out. Gu smeared the venom on the snake's body. Then, he took out a bottle of medicine and sprinkled it all over the snake's body. After a while, the originally bloody venomous snake turned black and dripped with unknown black venom. All the venomous snakes surrounded Long Fei Yi. Without any obstruction, Tang Li and Mu Ling could see Gu clearly from the side. Mu Ling hurried forward. "Chi brother, here's the antidote. Hurry up and take it." Gu ignored her and continued to play with the venomous snake in his hand. Mu Ling was anxious. "Chi brother, hurry up and take the medicine." "You will, sure." Gu put his blood-stained finger to his mouth. This action, coupled with his peerlessly beautiful face, had an indescribable evil beauty. Mu Ling was anxious, but she didn't dare to persuade him again. However, Tang Li was stunned. Not to mention Gu's ability to concoct poison on the spot, the wounds on his body were enough to shock people. Aside from the wound on his back, Gu Qishao looked carefree, but he was actually in a sorry state. There wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't injured, but covered in wounds. His gorgeous red robes had been torn to shreds, leaving his white undergarments soaked in blood. How many bites did this guy get? Although Tang Li didn't know much about poison, he still had some common sense. Judging from the wounds on Gu's body, it was enough to kill him immediately. However, he was still fine. Other than some fatigue between his brows and his pale face, there was no sign of his life being in danger. How was this possible? When Tang Li was young, he heard Chang Fei Ye's birth mother, his aunt, say that there was a type of person in this world who would stop growing after reaching 20 years old. They would forever have a young face and body. They would be hurt, injured, and exhausted, but they wouldn't die. Even if they were poisoned, they wouldn't die, only feel pain. After the pain passed, they would be fine. This type of person was called a poison Gu human. Raising a poison Gu human was the highest level of poison arts. Jun Xia raised poison Gu human, poison corpse, and poison Gu. Among the poison Gu, the most powerful one was a poison Gu human. Poison Gu human. This thought flashed through Tang Li's mind, but he quickly rejected it. Even he found it laughable. How could Gu have anything to do with a poison Gu human? The poison sect was already destroyed. It was said that the poison sect didn't raise a poison Gu human back then, let alone now. Gu Qishao must have done something to the snakes just then so he wouldn't die from the poison. No matter how Tang Li thought about it, this was the only explanation he could come up with. Without the poisonous snakes surrounding them, the Tang sect's hidden weapons were naturally put to good use. However, just as Tang Li was about to ambush Gu, Gu suddenly threw the poisonous snake in his hand at Chang Fei Yi. With this toss, a terrifying thing happened. The originally dead snake actually came back to life in midair. It raised its head and spat out a mouthful of venom at Chang Fei Yi. No one expected this to happen. Chang Fei Yi stopped in his tracks. "Be careful." Fortunately, Tang Li had been keeping an eye on him the entire time. Chang Fei Yi snapped out of his daze and immediately reached out to block it. But as soon as he reached out, the venom sprayed over and landed on his silver-threaded gloved hand. The silver-threaded glove could defend against hundreds of poisons. No matter how terrifying and strange the snake venom was, it was still blocked. Chang Fei-yi was safe and sound. He made a prompt decision and swept his long sword. For a moment, the sword light shone brightly, and the sword chi rippled out in circles. Not only did it shake off the surrounding poisonous snakes, but it also shook off the resurrected poisonous snake. The poisonous snake fell to the ground, dead at Gu's feet. Gu ignored it. All of his attention was on the silver-threaded glove on Chang Fei-yi's hand. Chang Fei-yi had been wearing it all this time, but he only noticed it now. This belongs to the Tang Sex Poison Sect. Did you give Han Yunqi those hidden weapons? Gu narrowed his eyes, very certain. It looked like he'd misunderstood Han Yunqi. She had nothing to do with the Tang sect. Chang Fei-yi was the one who had ties to the Tang sect. The silver-threaded glove was a treasure that caused a sensation in the poison world. The Tang Sex Poison Sect was a branch of the medical school's poison sect. Back then, even the medical school's poison sect coveted this item. Chang Fei-yi didn't have time to answer. The fragrance on his body hadn't dissipated, so he could only continue to fight against the poisonous snakes. It was worth mentioning that even though he was surrounded, he was still unharmed. The one who answered Gu was Tang Li. He stood behind Gu and aimed the pear-flower storm needles at him. Since you found out, then I'm sorry. As soon as Tang Li finished speaking, he immediately threw the needles. Gu dodged to the side. The snake venom cave was too dark, so Tang Li couldn't see clearly whether the pear-flower storm needles hit Gu or not. However, based on his assessment of Gu's martial arts, a sneak attack in this situation should have hit. The pear-flower storm needle's reputation wasn't just for show. Still, Gu Qishao was safe and sound. He finally met Tang Li's gaze. The pear blossom rain needles were actually in your hands. It looks like this young gentleman underestimated you. Those who possessed the pear-flower storm needles were either the Tang Sex Sect Master or the Tang Sex Young Sect Master. It's not too late to find out now. Tang Li didn't give up and threw the needles again. The pear-flower storm needles were limited and would be gone once they were used. However, Tang Li was very generous this time. He actually threw 3 needles in a row. However, what he couldn't accept was that Gu actually dodged all of them. He clearly saw how Gu dodged and saw that Gu was standing there unscathed. The pear-flower storm needles were known for their speed and strength. Even if they didn't hit a vital point, the strength of the golden needles was enough to seriously injure the opponent. If Gu was hit by the needles, even if he could survive, he definitely wouldn't be able to stand steadily. Just as Tang Li was shocked, Gu didn't hesitate. He pulled Mu Linger and turned to escape from the cave entrance. It had to be said that he was really ruthless. As soon as he got out, he put poison at the entrance of the snake cave, a deadly poison. Damn it! Although Tang Li was angry, he didn't chase after them. Instead, he hurried to help Long Fei-yi. He didn't know that after Gu used the poison, he fell heavily to the side of the cave entrance and couldn't stand up. His face was frighteningly pale and his narrow eyes were bloodshot. He didn't sit for long before he seemed to have lost all his strength and lay on the ground like a corpse. Would he die? Chapter 249. Would he die? He slowly closed his eyes. He was so quiet that it was frightening. If it wasn't for the weariness between his eyebrows, anyone who saw him would think that he was dead. Chi brother, you have to take the antidote quickly. Mu Ling-er cried. As she cried, she hurriedly stuffed handfuls of antidote into Gu's mouth. She knew that Chi brother wouldn't be able to hold on. After being bitten by so many poisonous snakes, it was really lucky that he didn't die down there. Why did Chi brother want to be enemies with the Emperor of Qin? What a stupid thing to do. Was it because of Han Yunqi? A trace of resentment flashed through Mu Ling's tearful eyes. She thought that if she had the chance to meet Han Yunqi, she would definitely teach her a lesson. Mu Ling was busy feeding him the antidote. She didn't notice that Gu's hands were not idle. He quietly pressed on his abdomen as if he was gathering his strength. Not long after, he secretly pulled out 2 pear flower storm needles from the side of his abdomen. Tang Li used for needles and he got 2 of them. He was very lucky. He was in pain all over. The wounds from the snake bites and the pear flower storm needles were all bleeding. Who knew what kind of pain this was? He could only endure it. He swallowed a lot of antidotes, but they were all stuck in his throat. When Mu Ling wasn't paying attention, Gu turned over and spat out all the antidotes. Mu Ling didn't dare to touch Gu. She didn't even dare to talk to him. She was afraid that she would waste his energy. She carefully guarded him. When she saw that Gu had turned over for a long time, she was worried and looked over. However, Gu quickly turned over again and looked at her. This time, Mu Ling's tears, which had stopped with great difficulty, suddenly burst out again. Chi brother, you scared me to death, crybaby. Gu's face was even paler when he smiled. Mu Ling's heart ached. She unconsciously rushed over and hugged him. Chi brother, don't be like this in the future, okay? No matter who it is, don't be like this. How can a life be worth a life? Of course, she could tell that he was going all out to take Chang Fei Ye's life. A self-deprecating smile appeared on Gu's lips as he muttered in a low voice, I really want to die, so that I don't have to suffer so much. Chi brother, what did you say? Mu Ling didn't hear him clearly. Gu pushed Mu Ling, but he was powerless to push her away. He looked up at the sky helplessly. Linger, you're hurting me. Let go. As soon as he said that, Mu Linger immediately let go of his hand. Gu stared at the entrance of the King Cobra cave. This time, if it weren't for Tang Li, he was worried that he would expose too much. Chang Fei Yi definitely wouldn't be able to survive. Soon, he asked Mu Linger to take out all the poisons hidden in his sleeves and lay an ambush at the entrance of the King Cobra cave. At this time, Chang Fei Yi and Tang Li were still killing the poisonous snakes. Even if they killed all the poisonous snakes in the cave, they wouldn't be able to come out. After Mu Linger laid an ambush with the poisons, Gu had almost rested enough. He was obviously injured all over, and they were all bites from the poisonous snakes. He only rested for a while, but he quickly recovered his strength and could stand up by himself. Chi brother, your life was saved. Don't force yourself, okay? Mu Linger was very worried. She was a pharmacist and was familiar with medicine. She was very clear about Gu's current physical condition. Of course, she didn't think too much about it. Instead, she thanked God in her heart. It's okay. You're Chi brother, I won't fall so easily. Gu regained his playful smile. You're still forcing yourself. Let's go back. We'll go back according to the map. Mu Linger, who was always fearless, was scared for the first time. Without the map, who knew how many poisonous traps were waiting for them in front of them? A poisonous cave had already tormented them like this. After all, there were 100 poisonous traps in this cave. They walked all the way according to the map in their hands and only encountered the first poisonous trap here. This meant that it was still safe for them to go back the way they came. But Gu Qishao simply tossed the map to her and said, you can leave first. Just leave the medicine to me. Although the medicine in Mu Linger's hand couldn't completely subdue the poisonous beast, it could at least calm it down. Once the Gu Shu calmed down, Gu was 100% confident that he could take it away. How could Mu Linger leave first? She had no interest in the goose shoe at all. The reason why she disobeyed her family's orders and secretly followed Gu was all for Gu. You come with me. If you continue to resist, you'll lose your life. Mu Ling'er was very serious. Gu stuffed the map into her hands and turned to leave. Mu Ling'er hurriedly pulled him back. You should at least send me up. Be good, don't make a fuss. You can go up by yourself. Gu pushed Mu Ling'er away without a trace. If you want to die here, I'll accompany you. Mu Ling'er was angry. She tore the map into pieces and scattered them all over the ground. She held on to Gu's arm and said boldly, "Let's go." Unexpectedly, at this moment, a secret door slowly opened on the side of the wall. Two figures appeared in front of them one after another. It was a man and a woman. The man was tall and was dressed in black. His arm was wrapped in bandages and seemed to be seriously injured. The woman was dressed in white like a fairy. She was otherworldly. They came so suddenly that Gu and the rest had no way to avoid them. They bumped into them directly. Jun Xia. Gu narrowed his eyes. He recognized the other party immediately. Mu Ling'er's attention was attracted by the woman in white. The woman was holding a famous sword. She looked so otherworldly that it was hard to ignore her. Looks like this prince came at the right time. With Gu's injuries, who wouldn't think that he was seriously injured? Jun Xia's lips curved up into a cold, arrogant smile. He crossed his arms over his chest and walked step by step towards Gu Qishao. Meanwhile, the white-robed celestial maiden wasn't interested at all. She simply leaned against the wall and waited. Seeing Jun Xia's arrogance, Mu Ling'er was about to speak when Gu signaled her with his eyes. He shielded her behind him. Although Mu Ling'er was worried, she obediently cooperated. Soon, she and Gu retreated to the foot of the wall. At this moment, Jun Xia stopped and said with interest, "Gu, if this prince remembers correctly, your poison skills are not ordinary." So what? Gu Qishao's body of injuries combined with his stubborn expression made for a wonderful sight. He looked like a powerless warrior who would rather die than submit. Jun Xia laughed. This prince will use you to test all the poison traps. It's just right. Don't even think about it. Even if I die, I definitely won't let you obtain the Gu shoe. Gu said righteously, but his eyes flashed with ridicule. That will depend on whether you have the ability. Jun Xia said and was about to make a move. Who knew that at this moment, Gu would suddenly kick out? God knows how much internal energy he used in this kick. With one kick, Jun Xia was sent flying. With a bam, he crashed heavily into the wall. Jun Xia did not expect this. Once he crashed into the wall, he immediately fell down with another bam. He knelt on one knee, one hand on the ground and the other on his chest. When he raised his head, he spat out a mouthful of black blood. Poison. Since His Highness Duke Kong praised this young master's poison skills, of course I should let him have a taste, right? Gu turned around and looked at Mu Ling'er with a brilliant smile. Mu Ling'er was stunned. She could not believe that Chi brother could deliver such a heavy kick. He did not seem to be injured or poisoned. Jun Xia suffered a great loss, but he would not admit it. He stood up and spat out a few more mouthfuls of black blood. Coldly, he said, "It's indeed not ordinary. It's good that I'll use you to pave the way." With that, he pulled out the treasured saber on his back. The saber's cold light was comparable to the light of the cold moon. The poisonous saber cold moon blade. Mu Ling'er blurted out. This was an ancient treasured saber. It got its name because the saber's light was comparable to the cold moon. Not to mention the blade, just the saber's light was enough to kill people and beasts. It seemed that Jun Xia came to steal the Gu Shu in advance with sufficient preparations. He even brought such a powerful weapon. Only then did Jun Xia notice Mu Ling. You're quite knowledgeable. However, he did not stop his actions. He raised the cold moon blade high and immediately slashed at Gu. The saber's light shone brightly, causing the air around them to change. Gu pushed Mu Ling away, but he did not dodge. The saber's light cut off a large piece of flesh from his shoulder. Pain. Gu was a man, but he was afraid of pain. Unfortunately, no one knew. He grinned and narrowed his eyes. He also took out a weapon. It was a black folding fan. It looked ordinary, but when he opened it, he saw that the fan's leaves were all sabers. This was a blade fan. He originally planned to use it to deal with the poisonous beast, but now he had to let Jun Xia have a taste of it. At this moment, Jun Xia's second slash came. Gu opened the blade fan and raised it above his head to block. When the blade fan and the cold moon blade collided, there was a crisp sound of collision. Those who did not know would think that the two masterpieces were broken. In fact, the two masterpieces were as good as new. However, Jun Xia and Gu's arms were torn and blood kept flowing out. At first, the two of them continued to exert their strength. However, as time passed, the wounds on their arms became bigger because of the force exerted. More and more blood flowed out. If this continued, it was very likely that they would die from excessive blood loss. At this moment, the masked woman in white, who had been watching from the side, suddenly stabbed at them with her sword. Despicable, taking advantage of people's difficulties. Mu Ling scolded and pulled out her sword. However, before she could see the masked woman's swordsmanship clearly, her sword was cut in half. The masked woman in white did not care about Mu Ling at all. She did not even look at her and turned to help Jun Xia. Jun Xia and Gu were in a deadlock. At this moment, even if there was only a little bit of external force, the winner would be decided immediately. The masked woman in white did not say anything and slashed her sword at Gu's blade fan. Gu could not withstand it. The blade fan was pressed to his head in an instant. The blades of the blade were almost touching his scalp. The consequences would be unimaginable if he blocked it. Let go of my chi brother. Bullying him with numbers, you are shameless. Let go of him. Mu Ling brandished her broken sword and wanted to fight the masked woman in white. Unfortunately, the woman in white dealt with her with one hand and pushed her far away, not letting her get close to Gu. However, Gu suddenly let go of the blade fan and let Jun Xia's blade and the masked woman in white sword come at him. No! Mu Ling could not stop them in time. She covered her eyes and screamed. Gu's eyes flashed with a touch of coldness. He would only feel pain, but not death. At this point, he could only let these two know the secret of his identity and then kill them. The blades of the blade and the eyes of the masked woman in white approached. However, at this moment, several sharp needles flew out from the darkness not far away and rushed at the arms of Jun Xia and the masked woman in white. The two of them hurriedly dodged and heard a familiar voice. Jun Xia, Duan Miao, stop. Who came? Chapter 250. Other than Mu Linger, everyone present recognized this voice, but no one expected that this person would enter the sinkhole. Gu's eyes lit up, and he immediately looked towards the dark path beside him. He muttered to himself suspiciously, Poison Girl is here too. Even if they successfully passed through the hundreds of traps, it wouldn't be easy to catch the poison beast. The last stage was the most dangerous, so he didn't ask Han Yunxi to come down with him. This girl doesn't know any martial arts, so who did she come with? Thinking of this, Gu unconsciously looked down at his feet. Long Fei Yi and Tang Li were still trapped down there. Who else could Han Yunqi, who had no relatives or friends in Medical City, have come with? As soon as she heard the words, "Poison Girl," Mu Ling'er pouted, her displeasure written all over her face. Unfortunately, no one paid any attention to her. Han Yunqi emerged from the shadows, followed by a white-robed, masked man. One in front and one in back, Han Yunqi walked calmly and unhurriedly, while the white-robed man's steps were light and slow. His entire being emanated the warmth of an April spring breeze. No one would have guessed that Han Yunqi had been kidnapped, but assumed that this white-robed man was her personal guard. Actually, Han Yunqi hadn't encountered any difficulties while following the white-robed man. Their journey was very smooth. Originally, the man in white wanted to turn to the other side, but her detoxification system detected hundreds of poisons here. Many of them were from ancient times, and the detoxification system only recorded them, not collected them. She said that she wanted to come over and take a look, and the man in white actually agreed, so she didn't hold back. Who knew that she would see Gu about to be split in half as soon as she arrived? When she saw Han Yunqi walk out, Duan Muyao wanted to hold back, but she couldn't help it. Cold, she said, "Han Yunqi, enemies really do meet on a narrow road." Duan Muyao had kept track of everything from Pill Fiend Valley's teasing and humiliation in Tianning's capital city. She was the closed-door disciple of the Celestial Mountain Sword sect and the princess of the first wife of Western Zhou, but she'd been belittled time and time again by this lowly woman. Even her marriage alliance had been rejected because of this woman. Now that she'd come all the way here without Long Fei around, how could she leave the matter at that? When did Western Zhou's princess get together with Northern Li's Duke of Kong? Does Western Zhou's emperor know? Han Yunqi was very surprised. She recalled how Tang Li had said that Jun Yixia had been rescued by a white-robed woman with formidable swordsmanship. After all, Western Zhou and Tianning were allied by marriage. Western Zhou and Tianning had always been enemies of Northern Li. Even if Duan Muyao couldn't marry Long Fei, Western Zhou and Tianning had already signed an agreement to defend their borders together. Was Duan Muyao's way of doing things on her own, or was there some shady business going on between Western Zhou and Northern Li? "If I silence you, that old man will never know." Duan Muyao was overbearing and aggressive. Judging from the current situation, she'd definitely be able to kill Han Yunqi without Long Fei here. Hearing this, Han Yunqi knew that Duan Muyao was secretly seducing Jun Yixia. Unwilling to be outdone, she said, "If you can't silence this Wang Fei, then I'll let all of Cloud Realm Continent know about this. Just try it." Duan Muyao raged as she raised her sword to attack. Unexpectedly, Jun Yixia walked over and shielded her with a warning look. Duan Muyao and Jun Yixia might be partners, but she still feared him. She only gave a soft snort and didn't say a word. "Han Yunqi, just what kind of poison did you use on your lordship?" Jun Yixia asked cold. "Just like bone poison, there's no antidote." Han Yunqi's serious expression made Jun Yixia feel unwell all over. Jun Yixia had come to Medical City for the poison beast as well. He'd come early because he couldn't cure the poison in his arm, nor could he deal with Han Yunqi. Thus, he could only take the risk to find the poison beast's blood. "Since that's the case, then your lordship has no need to keep you alive." Jun Yixia was truly ruthless this time. He'd been like this ever since he was a child. If he couldn't get his hands on something no matter how hard he tried, he'd rather destroy it. Once again, he raised his Frost Moon saber, its light flickering with a frightening chill. Seeing this, Duan Muyao impatiently unsheathed her sword as well. "Duke of Kong, leave this woman to me." Although she'd been far away from Tianning's capital for the past few months, she'd still been keeping an eye on the Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi's movements. She knew of Han Yunqi's poison skills and assassination weapons, but she'd never taken them seriously. She was certain that as long as she didn't give Han Yunxi a chance to ambush her, this woman would be no match for her. No. Your lordship will kill her with his own hands. Jun Yixie's eyes reflected Han Yunxi's figure as if he wanted to swallow her whole. Han Yunxi realized that Jun Yixie's killing intent was real. Her poisons were no longer a threat to him. If you don't get the poison beast's blood, then no one but me will be able to save your hand. She warned coldly. Your lordship must get the poison beast's blood. Jun Yixie was very confident. As soon as he sensed Han Yunxi's vigilance, he began to inch closer. As soon as he did, Gu reached out to grab Han Yunxi. Gu was about to grab Han Yunxi's hand when Han Yunxi suddenly vanished from his sight. Where did she go? Gu reflexively turned back, only to see Han Yunxi being pulled behind his back by the masked man. What incredible speed! Gu exclaimed in his heart. Jun Yixie abruptly stopped in his tracks. You're from the Shadow Clan. Only the Shadow Clan's shadow technique, which was not taught to outsiders, could allow one's Qin Gong to reach this level of perfection. The great Qin Empire that once unified Cloud Realm continent had two imperial clans, Eastern and Western Qin, as well as the 7 noble families. The Shadow Clan was one of the 7 noble families who were responsible for protecting the Western Qin Imperial Clan. Rumors said that the Shadow Clan protected their clan with their lives and had never failed to fulfill their duties, much less betray them. Following the fall of the Great Qin Empire and its Imperial Clan, the 7 noble families gradually disappeared without a trace. He never expected to see the Shadow Arts again today. As soon as he heard the name, Gu realized that the speed just then had been due to the Shadow Arts. If this white-robed man was protecting Han Yunxi, could it be, so, she's the orphan of the Western Qin Imperial Clan? Duanmu Yao suddenly exclaimed. She couldn't accept this reality. After all, the Great Qin Empire was a legend in Cloud Realm continent. The East and Western Qin Imperial clans were the true imperial clans in the hearts of the people. They were truly worthy of submission and worship. Compared to the Great Qin Imperial Clan, the 3 countries weren't even worth a mention. If Han Yunxi was the real deal, then her last bit of pride would be trampled underfoot. The white-robed man didn't answer Duanmu Yao's question directly. He looked gentle and mild, but he didn't give anyone face. He didn't even spare Jun Yixie or Gu a glance before turning to Han Yunxi and saying, I asked you to pave the way for me, not cause trouble. Everyone exhaled in relief at his words. It looked like Han Yunxi wasn't the orphan of the Western Qin Imperial Clan after all. If she was, then it wouldn't be easy to touch her with the Shadow Clan's protection. Han Yunxi had never heard of the Shadow Clan, East Qin, or Western Qin. She only knew that she couldn't let Jun Yixie and Duanmu Yao get their hands on the poison beast. Help me kill them. Otherwise, I won't go with you. Han Yunxi said this and her body nimbly flashed to Gu's side. Gu was happy and quickly reached out to protect Han Yunxi. He smiled at the white-robed man and said, Kill them and I'll go with you. This fellow was so shameless. Even Han Yunxi felt embarrassed for him. The white-robed man treated Gu like air. He looked at Han Yunxi with gentle eyes and a gentle voice, I'll try. He said he wanted to try. Why did such a gentle voice, such a humble answer, sound so arrogant? He turned to look at Jun Yixie and Duanmu Yao. Duanmu Yao immediately retreated. She was confident in her sword skills, but she wasn't confident in her speed. Speed was the only thing that couldn't be broken in this world. The shadow technique didn't have anything else other than speed. The shadow technique was only the basics. Martial arts based on this foundation were fast, no matter what kind of martial arts they used. Their attacks were fast, and their dodges were fast. In other words, no matter how powerful their martial arts were or how profound their inner strength was, if they weren't fast enough, they wouldn't be able to beat him. Right now, it was relatively easy to take advantage of the complicated terrain to escape. Duanmu Yao retreated a few steps. She couldn't care less about Junie Xia. She turned and fled. Duanmu Yao, I'll definitely tell Long Fei Yi. Han Yunqi shouted. She admitted that she was very naughty. She could poke at Duanmu Yao's sore spot with a single sentence. Of course, if Long Fei Yi was present, she wouldn't have shouted that. She would have just remained silent. Junie Xia was indignant and anxious, but he also began to retreat step by step. With Duanmu Yao fleeing, he had no choice but to retreat as well. His arm was heavily injured, and without the assistance of Duanmu Yao's sword skills, he had no confidence in dealing with this mysterious white-robed man. Don't let him get away. Han Yunqi shouted. Duanmu Yao didn't count for anything, but Junie Xia was the real threat to her life. But the white-robed man only said seriously, Miss Yunqi, why kill a deserter? Cough, cough. Junie Xia was still retreating. He hadn't even escaped yet. You shouldn't humiliate him like this. This gentle gentleman, are you sure you didn't do it on purpose? Even Han Yunqi didn't expect him to say such words, much less say them so seriously. Junie Xia was unwilling to accept this to begin with. Now he was so angry that his nostrils were about to spit fire. He raised his broadsword and viciously slashed at the group. His blade glinted brilliantly, shaking the small cave until half of it collapsed. In the chaos, Junie Xia had long disappeared without a trace. The white-robed man was the first to protect Han Yunqi. Gu wasn't as fast as him, so he could only watch from the sidelines. Still, he didn't notice that Mu Ling had been staring at him the entire time. Fortunately, the cave was well supported and didn't collapse completely, so the exit wasn't blocked off. Why did you let him escape? Han Yunqi demanded. Didn't this guy say he was going to try? Was he joking? But the white-robed man was serious. Miss Yunqi, you're a doctor. Why must you be so ruthless? Han Yunqi almost choked on her own saliva at these words. What a wonderful answer. She had no words to retort. Can we go now? The white-robed man quickly gathered his thoughts. He had only one goal in mind this time. Han Yunqi stole a glance at Gu, who immediately understood with a smile. Since we've run into each other, let's go together. Before the white-robed man could say anything, the silent Mu Ling suddenly spoke up. Qi brother, if we leave, what will happen to the other two? To the readers, Third Night Watch, come at 9 p.m. We've created an official 479540437 group. Momo is there too. Welcome to the group, but be careful to urge them. Chapter 251. There were two people down there. As soon as Mu Ling said this, Gu's face immediately darkened. Han Yunqi asked suspiciously, there are people down there. Isn't there a king cobra down there? As soon as she said this, Gu's face turned pale again. Han Yunqi had come here because she was attracted by the poison here. Her detoxification system had detected that there was a large amount of king cobra venom here. Moreover, there were hundreds of different types of poisons gathered together. Although his face was pale, Gu still calmed down and asked, how did you know that there was a king cobra here? Did you walk past it? I smelled it. Can't you smell the strong poison? Han Yunqi asked calmly. If the man in white hadn't been there, she would have panicked and said that she had walked past it. How could it smell so good? The man in white looked at Han Yunqi, his gentle eyes scrutinizing her. However, Gu had no time to be suspicious. He changed the topic. He brought you down. He wants to help you find the poisonous beast. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi wasn't so easily fooled. She walked around and stomped hard, trying to find the entrance. There's someone down there. Who is it? Mu Ling still wanted to say more, but she was stunned when she met Gu's fierce warning gaze. She had known Chi brother for so many years, but he had never been fierce to her before. He was actually fierce to her because of Han Yunxi. Mu Ling felt so wrong that her eyes turned red again. She clenched her fists tightly, but no matter how hard she clenched them, she didn't dare to. She was so afraid that Chi brother would ignore her from now on. No one answered for a long time. Han Yunxi looked at Mu Ling. Young lady, who's trapped down there? Mu Ling didn't know how to hide her emotions. She glared at Han Yunxi fiercely and turned her head away. Han Yunxi was confused by his stare. She asked Gu casually, she is, Mu Ling, the genius pharmacist of the Mu family. Gu was eager to have a topic to talk about. Of course, Han Yunxi knows about the genius pharmacist of the Mu family and the important person who drugged the poisonous beast this time. Do you know each other? Han Yunxi asked. Mu Ling replied hurriedly, Brother Qi and I, all right, she had been with me for a long time, but she couldn't come up with anything. She didn't want to say that they were like siblings, but they were more than friends. In the end, she said, anyway, Qi brother knew me before he knew you. Han Yunxi didn't care about their relationship at all. She activated the detox system and had it automatically search for poisons around them as she asked Gu Qishao, just what's going on down there? The people who came to steal the poisonous beast. I don't know them. Gu answered casually, as if it was really nothing important. You trapped them down there? Han Yunxi continued to ask. When she saw Gu covered in blood before, she was worried. Later, she saw that he was in good spirits, so she didn't rush to ask. Just now, she took a careful look and was 100% sure that the wounds on his body were snake bites. In other words, this guy must have gone into the snake cave and experienced a very fierce fight. Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi's gaze changed as she looked at Gu Qishao. Just what kind of person was down there? Someone who could injure Gu Qishao to this extent and do his best to hide it. If this guy didn't hide it, she would be anxious to find the poisonous beast. Now that he hid it, she was excited. There must be something wrong here. Gu was hiding something from her. Gu avoided Han Yunxi's question and urged the man in white, let's go quickly. It'll be troublesome if Jun Xia finds the poisonous beast first. Han Yunxi wasn't in a hurry. If they weren't familiar with this place, they would be trapped for a long time if they touched any of the poison traps. She walked around slowly, looking for the entrance while talking to herself, there's still boiling powder down there, and, hearing the words, boiling powder, even Mu Ling was shocked. To be precise, boiling powder was a kind of medicine, and its toxicity was very low. She didn't know about poisons, but Han Yunxi said that she could smell the poison. Maybe it was true. However, boiling powder was odorless, and it had been used for so long. How could Han Yunxi smell it? The man in white used a cautious gaze to scrutinize Han Yunxi again, as if trying to discover something from her. Gu's mouth twitched, but before he could speak, Han Yunxi added, there's also black snake juice, but there's not much of it. It's very fresh, probably concocted on the spot. Black snake juice. This was the poison that Gu had just concocted on the spot in the snake cave. Han Yunxi could even smell it. At this moment, Gu finally sensed that something was wrong. Poison lass, you really smelled it. Han Yunxi ignored him and suddenly stopped at the side, staring at her feet and muttering, there are so many poisons here, 7-star flowers, dragon snake seeds, xiaoxiang snake leaves. She slowly squatted down, and as she recited the names of the poisons, she put on a glove and felt around on the ground. Indeed, she found quite a lot of poisonous powder. Gu leaned against the wall and suddenly had the urge to escape. This frightening woman. How did she do it? She had almost told him everything that he had just done. Now, all that was left was to find the entrance to the snake cave, and the entrance was actually right beside her feet, blocked by a rock. Gu had already completely shut up and stared at the rock, thinking that as long as Han Yunxi did not find the entrance, it would be useless no matter how much she knew. Gu was still worried, and he glared at Mu Ling. The heartbroken Mu Ling pursed her lips, and finally, her tears flowed silently. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Han Yunxi muttered to herself, who placed so many poisons at the entrance. Yes, she had already found the entrance. There were hundreds of poisons at the entrance, and anyone who went down from this entrance would definitely be poisoned. Many of the poisons inside were very deadly. If this was a trap, then the snake cave below was unnecessary. So, someone deliberately placed these poisons. Han Yunxi explained seriously. Once she finished speaking, she immediately asked Gu, "You placed them?" Gu was speechless, and could only pull the corners of his mouth, and put on a fake smile. Han Yunxi felt more and more strange. Just as she was about to push away that rock, Gu knew that the rock was suddenly sent flying by a strong and overbearing sword chi. Following that, a large group of dead king snake eyes flew out from the cave entrance, and fell to the side. This kind of sword chi was not something that anyone could have. A complicated look flashed past the white-robed man's eyes, and in an instant, he landed beside Han Yunxi, and pulled Han Yunxi up. "Let's go." Gu did not expect this, and subconsciously went to stop him. However, a figure flew out from the snake cave faster than him, and chased after the white-robed man. Not long after, he slashed out a sword chi. That sword chi was very thin, like a thin ray of light, and aimed at the back of the white-robed man's head. The white-robed man could only dodge, and once he dodged, his speed slowed down. In an instant, that black-robed man caught up with them. He grabbed the white-robed man's hand that was pressing on Han Yunxi's shoulder, and his other hand domineeringly pulled Han Yunxi over, and held her in his arms. Familiar temperature, familiar aura, familiar domineering, familiar person. It was him, Long Fei Yi. His eyes were cold, and he stared at the white-robed man. His arms were strong, and he hugged Han Yunxi very, very tightly. Han Yunxi was stunned. "You brought her down." Long Fei Yi was dealing with the poisonous snakes below, and he heard all the fighting and arguments above. "I just happened to meet her at the cave entrance, so I gave her a ride," the white-robed man said very simply. "Since when did the Shadow Clan like to meddle in other people's business?" Long Fei Yi asked again. The Shadow Clan was the protector of the Western Qin imperial family. Other than protecting the Western Qin imperial family, they generally did not care about other things. "You're too idle," the white-robed man said jokingly. "You can go." Long Fei Ye's domineering and noble nature were innate as he ordered. She agreed to go with me. The white-robed man was as gentle as before. "She's going back on her word now," Long Fei Yi directly replied, not giving Han Yunxi a chance to speak. The white-robed man did not reply, and suddenly attacked with a palm. The palm wind was as sharp as a blade. Long Fei Yi protected Han Yunxi and dodged. Chapter 252. Han Yunxi exuded a serious and authoritative aura, which was enough to intimidate everyone present. The man in white slowly loosened his clenched fists. He gave up the best opportunity to attack Long Fei Yi and sat silently by the side. As he watched, his eyes unconsciously became gentle again. He was always obsessed with the way this woman detoxified and couldn't extricate himself. Gu watched without moving. His expression was a little stupefied. He didn't take the opportunity to escape and seemed to be absent-minded. The king cobra's venom was a piece of cake for Han Yunshi. However, Long Fei Yi was poisoned by so much king cobra's venom at once. If he didn't detoxify it in time, his life would be in danger. Han Yunshi expelled the poison from Long Fei Yi's leg as fast as she could and then hurriedly applied medicine. She lowered her head and narrowed her eyes. The movements of her hands were professional, quick and clean. She was completely immersed in this urgency, as if even if the sky fell, it had nothing to do with her. She didn't realize that she was nervous. She also didn't notice that Long Fei Yi had been staring at her with his head lowered. There were traces of joy in his deep eyes. He was very, very close to her. His forehead was almost touching her head. This scene in the dark and cold cave was particularly warm. Although she was very fast, Han Yunshi still treated every wound seriously and neatly. Even the bandages were very meticulous. One more layer of gauze would be too thick, and one less layer wouldn't be enough. The bandages were just right. They wouldn't hinder Long Fei Yi from walking and wouldn't be too ugly. After a while, more than 10 wounds were all treated. Han Yunshi exhaled and looked up. It's safe. Unexpectedly, when she raised her head, she bumped into Long Fei Yi's chin. Long Fei Yi immediately raised his head to avoid it. Han Yunshi also subconsciously stepped back a little. It hurts. Why is this guy's jaw so hard? This bump finally pulled her back from her nervousness. She looked to the side, obviously deliberately avoiding Long Fei Yi. The expression on her elegant little face was especially silent and forbearing, as if the serious, strong, and intimidating woman just now was not her. This was the first time they met since he had forcefully kissed her in the tea house. She really didn't know how to face him. Or rather, she really didn't know what to do with this man. She had always been a person who could let go of things easily. She was also a person with strong self-control. However, after meeting him, everything changed. She couldn't even control herself. The surroundings were silent, and the two of them were even more silent. Han Yunshi looked to the side, but damn it, she wanted to know what Long Fei Yi was doing and what kind of expression he had. She hated this silence. She hated being in such a dilemma. Sit properly, there's still poison in your body that hasn't been cured. She spoke first. Cold and even a little fierce, as if she was facing a disobedient patient. Long Fei Yi had just flown out of the cave filled with poison, and he had also been ambushed by a lot of poisons around the cave entrance. If it weren't for Tang Li's shout, she wouldn't have realized this problem. Han Yunshi activated the detoxification system's detection function instead of the scanning function. But unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi suddenly reached over and gently rubbed her forehead with his big hand. Han Yunshi didn't expect this and subconsciously raised her head to look at him. She saw Long Fei Yi looking down at her with a silent expression. Even his usually cold and emotionless eyes were silent. He gently rubbed the pain on her forehead without saying anything. His hand was very big and rough because he had been holding a sword for many years. Her skin was delicate and sensitive. His palm was full of masculine heat, and her forehead was cold. The coarseness and the gentleness, the heat and the coolness blended together. As he rubbed her forehead, she felt an indescribable sense of comfort. At this moment, Han Yunshi forgot all the previous entanglement and hurt. Once again, she subconsciously indulged in his eyes that were as deep as the sea. Long Fei Yi, it turns out that you also have such a quiet and peaceful side. In this life, can I have the luxury of being as gentle as water for once? The scene of detoxification just now was shocking, but now this warm and peaceful scene was simply a public display of affection. Cough, cough. Goose suddenly coughed loudly. Cough, cough, cough. He coughed so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. Han Yunxi regained her senses and turned her head away. Long Fei Ye's hand was empty, so he immediately retracted it. He didn't look at Gu, but gave Tang Li a look. Tang Li was about to make a move, but who knew that Han Yunxi would get it? She narrowed her eyes at Gu and said in a bad mood, "Where's the antidote?" Gu Qishao feigned ignorance and kept coughing lightly a few more times. 5-colored lotus, Luo wintry parting grass, and beauty's worry. These are the antidotes for these 3 poisons. The detoxification system had already analyzed that Long Fei Yi had only been poisoned by 3 types of poisons because he was so fast. Unfortunately, these 3 poisons were all ancient poisons. The detoxification system had recorded the antidote formula, but unfortunately, there were no ready-made antidotes. Actually, it wasn't easy to get those antidotes now, let alone the detoxification system. Gu's coughing stopped abruptly. He smiled at Han Yunxi and turned to leave without saying anything. "Stop right there." Han Yunxi and Tang Li shouted at the same time. Tang Li chased after him. Gu ignored Han Yunxi and looked at Tang Li. He smiled lightly, enchanting and cold. "Young Master Tang, the pear flower storm needles aren't something you can make. Don't waste them." Tang Li didn't know the truth. He only thought that Gu had successfully dodged 4 of his pear flower storm needles. Tang Li thought that they had underestimated this guy. It would be a waste to use the pear flower storm needles now. Hence, he really didn't use them. "Even without the pear flower storm needles, I can still take care of you. I'm so scared." Gu's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. He got into a fighting stance. Without the pear flower storm needles, he was happy to play with this young master of the Tang sect. However, before Tang Li could make a move, Han Yunxi shouted angrily, "You with the surname Gu, don't think that I don't know that you're stalling for time. Give me the antidote now. This poison can't be delayed." There were 3 types of poison in Long Fei Ye's body. Among them, the Luo Shang parting grass poison acted up very quickly. If it wasn't detoxified in time, even if Han Yunxi could expel part of the poison, the remaining poison would quickly invade the brain. By then, even if there was an antidote, there would be repercussions. If one didn't understand this poison, no one would be able to tell that Gu was stalling for time. However, Han Yunxi saw through it. At Han Yunxi's words, Tang Li grew anxious. "You despicable villain." But the person in question, Long Fei Yi, didn't take it to heart. All of his attention was on Han Yunxi. This woman looked the best when she was serious, especially now. Tianning's Duke of Qin had never been protected by anyone in his life. It wasn't that no one wanted to protect him, but that he wasn't used to it and didn't need it. But right now, there was a woman protecting him. Gu Qishao's eyes flashed with bitterness, but it quickly disappeared. In the end, he ignored the angry Han Yunxi and beckoned with his finger to signal Tang Li to let the horse pass. "Give me both the antidote and your life." Tang Li drew a short sword and stabbed forward, but Gu only dodged without making a move. That's right, he was stalling for time. Finally, Han Yunxi grew angry. She stood up and said, "Gu, if you don't give me the antidote now, we'll break off our friendship." At her words, Gu's movements came to an abrupt halt. At the same time, Tang Li didn't have time to withdraw his short sword before it stabbed into his shoulder. At this moment, Han Yunxi gave a start as her heart skipped a beat. Tang Li was stunned. He never expected Gu to stop just like that. Mu Ling burst into tears. "She brother." Gu was stunned as well. Damn it, his shoulder was clearly injured, but why did his heart hurt so much? Tang Li came to his senses, but he didn't feel guilty. Based on Gu's scheme against him and Long Fei Yi just now, even 100 stabs wouldn't be enough to appease his anger. He pulled out his short sword without hesitation. Tang Li's short sword was not an ordinary short sword, it was also a hidden weapon. Once the blade pierced into a person's body, countless thin hooks would extend and hook into the flesh. With such a fierce pull, blood instantly spurted out from Gu's shoulder blade. God knew how painful it was. "Give me the antidote," Tang Li urged angrily. Gu, who was always afraid of pain, ignored the pain in his shoulder blade and ignored Tang Li. Instead, he finally looked at Han Yunqi. He looked at her for a long time and smiled. His smile was still as flirtatious and beautiful. He asked as if he was joking, "Poison girl, how can you be so biased? He tried to kill me last time. Why didn't you divorce him?" Although he sounded like he was joking, his gaze was stubborn. He was as stubborn as a child who was determined to get an answer. Han Yunqi looked at the wound on Gu's shoulder, then looked at the flesh and blood in Tang Li's hand that mimicked the blade. Her breathing quickened. She really felt sorry for Gu. However, even though she couldn't bear it, she still had to get the antidote. Long Fei Yi couldn't wait any longer. "I saved you last time, didn't I?" Han Yunqi retorted. "Poison lass, you saving me and divorcing him are two different things." Gu Qishao was still smiling, his smile carefree and heartless. "You." Han Yunqi was so angry that she didn't know how to refute. Gu had no intention of leaving either. They were in a stalemate. "What will it take for you to give me the antidote?" Han Yunqi was anxious. The poison in Long Fei Ye's body couldn't be depleted. Gu was determined not to give him the antidote. He was still in the mood to tease Han Yunqi. He said, "Let me think about it for a few days before I tell you." At this moment, Long Fei Yi, who had been staring at Han Yunqi, finally turned to look at Gu. A cold murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Even if he was poisoned, with his current physical strength, he could easily kill Gu before the poison took effect. However, just as Long Fei Yi was about to make his move, note to the readers, today is the first update. Tomorrow is the third update. Chapter 253. Just as Long Fei Yi was about to make a move on Gu, Han Yunqi suddenly said coldly, "Tang Li, hurry out and help me find 3 herbs, Buddha tea, 3 provinces flower, and green vine seed. Go to Medicine City in Medicine Ghost Valley to find them, quickly." After she finished speaking, she didn't continue the stalemate with Gu and directly ignored Gu. She turned around and returned to Long Fei Ye's side and decisively took out a set of gold needles. "Don't worry, I will keep watching over you until Tang Li returns," she said very seriously to Long Fei Yi. Her voice was very loud, so loud that everyone could hear her. In this life, this was the first time someone had said, "Don't worry," to Long Fei Yi, and it was also the first time someone had said to him that she would keep watch over him. Although he really wanted to tell Han Yunqi that he didn't need a woman's protection, but at this moment, he actually silently withdrew the hand that was about to draw his sword and unexpectedly nodded. Even his voice was 3 degrees warmer as he said, "Okay." Han Yunqi once again confirmed the location of the poison and decisively began to apply the needles. Seeing this, the roguish smile on Gu's lips slowly disappeared. He stared blankly for a long time as Han Yunqi seriously prepared the needles. "Poison lass," he called out tentatively, and when he saw that Han Yunqi ignored him, he suddenly shouted loudly, "Hey, poison lass." Unfortunately, a sly look flashed across Han Yunqi's eyes and she still ignored him. Recalling Han Yunqi's words of breaking off ties, Gu became anxious and without thinking, he immediately took out 3 antidotes and threw them over. "Poison lass, for you." This time, Han Yunqi was delighted. This was exactly the effect she wanted. She was about to reach out to receive the antidotes, but who knew that Long Fei Yi would send a gust of wind from his palm and the 3 antidotes were shattered into pieces and scattered on the ground. Han Yunxi was dumbfounded when she saw the 3 antidotes that she had worked so hard to obtain shattered on the ground. Long Fei looked coldly at Gu Qishao. No need. Your lordship will settle this debt. Since Han Yunxi could guarantee that he was fine, how could he accept Gu's antidote? He was very willing to let this woman guard him. He was even more willing to let this woman and Gu become strangers from now on. He believed that Han Yunxi was a woman of her words. She would cut ties with him. Seeing this, Gu narrowed his eyes and slowly clenched his fists. Settle the score. You owe this young master even more. Then let's settle the score. Long Fei Yi stood up. Swords were drawn between the two of them, and a great battle was about to begin. Poison lass, look carefully. He's the one who doesn't know what's good for him. Don't blame me for not giving you face. Gu said word by word. Long Fei Yi snorted and didn't say anything. He used actions to replace words and pulled Han Yunxi behind him, not letting her interfere. Seeing that Long Fei Yi was about to draw his sword and that Gu was doomed, seeing that the poison had entered Long Fei Yi's body and was about to take effect, Han Yunxi only felt that her head was about to explode. She suddenly shouted angrily, "Enough!" Gu was still frightened by Han Yunxi. He pursed his lips and calmed down a little. However, how could Long Fei Yi be intimidated by Han Yunxi's words? With a clang, he pulled out his long sword. Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi scolded him with his full name, but then said in a low voice, "Idiot, do you really think that I can save you without the antidote?" Long Fei Yi didn't expect this at all. What did she mean by that? She couldn't save him without the antidote. So, she was lying to him just now, and also to Gu. Long Fei Yi suddenly felt a sense of helplessness that he had never felt before. This woman who had just reassured him was now calling him an idiot. It was another first. The first time someone dared to call him an idiot, but he really couldn't do anything about it. And he was indeed as easily fooled as an idiot. Take it that I'm begging you, cooperate with me. I can't fool him, okay? The longer the poison in your body is dragged out, the more harmful it will be to your body. Han Yunxi said very seriously, as if she wasn't trying to save Long Fei Yi's life, but her own. Seeing her anxious look, Long Fei Yi's heart was filled with warmth. He couldn't get angry even if he wanted to. Once again, he obeyed this woman and obediently kept his sword. Once again, he allowed her to protect him. Seeing this, Gu Qishao finally let down his guard. Hey, are you still giving me the antidote? Han Yunxi asked casually. Gu didn't move and didn't respond for a long time. If he gave the antidote, he couldn't accept Long Fei Yi's arrogance. If he didn't give the antidote, he couldn't bear to do it to Han Yunxi. Gu really didn't know what to do with this girl. After struggling for a while, when he saw the impatient expression on Han Yunxi's face, Gu didn't think anymore. He took out the antidote and threw it over. Poison girl, I'll give you some face. Once the antidote was in her hands, Han Yunxi didn't immediately let Long Fei Yi take it. Instead, she first checked the authenticity of the antidote. Poison girl, don't you trust me that much? Although Gu was smiling, his smile was very ugly. I'm used to checking. It's the same no matter who gives it to me. This wasn't Han Yunxi's excuse. As a poison doctor, no matter when she used medicine, she had to be strict. Not to mention if it was given by someone else, even if it was taken from the detoxification system, she had to double-check it. No matter how intelligent the system was, there was still a possibility of error, wasn't there? Of course I have to check the antidote given by a despicable person like you. Tang Li couldn't help but open his mouth. You're the despicable person, you're all despicable people. Mu Ling seized the opportunity to refute. The more she saw how Han Yunxi hurt Chi brother, the angrier she became. She couldn't wait to find a chance to quarrel with her. Tang Li originally had a good impression of this genius pharmacologist. When he heard this, he was instantly disappointed. He sneered and asked, Mu Ling, does your father know that you're mixing with such a despicable and shameless person as the young lady of the Mu family? Finally, the disappointed Gu was enraged. He said coldly, What? The Tang sect only uses hidden weapons to ambush people. What do you know about being honorable and upright? You! Tang Li was speechless. It was fine to insult him, but definitely not the Tang sect. Am I wrong? Among all the sects in the pugilistic world, the Tang sect is the most despicable, shameless, and filthy. Gu had a stomach full of anger and had nowhere to vent it. He couldn't touch Long Fei Yi, but he could at least touch Tang Li, right? Tang Li was furious, but he didn't argue with Gu. Instead, he looked at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi, do you know why we fell into the snake cave? As soon as these words came out, the angry and irritated Gu instantly calmed down as if a basin of cold water had been poured over his head. This was probably what it meant to not die if one didn't seek death. Han Yunxi had just discovered that the scary thing about this snake cave was that there were many snakes. The design of the traps wasn't considered top-notch. At least for Long Fei Yi and Tang Li, it was only of average standard. There was really no reason for them to enter by mistake. She shook her head suspiciously. Why? Because Gu used your name to swindle us. He lied to us that you were trapped inside. Tang Li couldn't wait to tell her the answer. Han Yunxi didn't expect this. She immediately looked at Gu, her clear eyes narrowed with anger and murderous intent. Gu Qishao didn't dare to meet Han Yunxi's eyes, but he stubbornly refused to admit his mistake. I was just joking. Who knew a certain someone would underestimate poison lass so much? Why didn't you think that a trifling king cobra could trap her? You don't know her well enough, do you? His words were like killing 3 birds with 1 stone. He explained himself, insulted Long Fei Yi, and even praised Han Yunxi. Unfortunately, Tang Li's words made Gu want to go home and check the almanac to see if today was a bad day. Tang Li said, the Duke of Qin was confused because he was too concerned. Long Fei Yi had just taken the medicine and was resting on the side with his eyes closed. No one knew if he heard, but he didn't say anything. Han Yunxi was actually sitting next to Long Fei Yi. She was waiting for the antidote to take effect so that she could examine Long Fei Yi's body. She couldn't help but sneak a glance at Long Fei Yi. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi suddenly opened his eyes and looked at her. Han Yunxi immediately dodged. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything and continued to close his eyes. If he didn't say anything and didn't explain, did that mean he was admitting it? So it seems that His Highness Duke of Qin is also looking for the poison beast for Poison Girl. Gu's face was full of sarcasm. Based on his understanding of Long Fei Yi, this guy wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits. He definitely didn't come to Medical City just for Han Yunxi. If he remembered correctly, Long Fei Yi had come to the sinkhole once 5 years ago. Of course. Tang Li answered without hesitation. In fact, if Gu hadn't said so, he really wouldn't have thought that the poison beast's blood could cure Long Tianma's bone poison. He and Long Fei Yi had indeed come to Medical City for the poison beast, but they hadn't planned to enter the sinkhole in advance. Now it seemed that Long Fei Yi had come down early for Han Yunxi. You know very well whether or not it's true. Gu looked meaningfully at Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi stole another glance at him, but unfortunately, he didn't say anything. The poison should be gone, she said indifferently. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi reached out and asked casually, "Tomorrow night is the deadline, right?" Deadline? What deadline? Han Yunqi didn't understand. "Don't worry, there's still time," Long Fei Yi said indifferently as he held Han Yunqi's hand and stood up. At this moment, Han Yunqi finally understood that tomorrow night was the deadline for her bet with Third Elder. Long Fei Yi, he really came for her. He admitted it, but it wasn't a tacit admission. How could he be so overjoyed? Their future was obviously uncertain and the poison beast was hard to find, but after hearing Long Fei Ye's words of "don't worry," Han Yunqi felt inexplicably at ease. "Okay." She nodded without hesitation, just like when Long Fei Yi said the word "okay," she was especially firm. Long Fei Yi didn't pay much attention to Gu, and he also ignored the silent man in white at the side. He held Han Yunqi's hand and was about to leave. A trace of calculation flashed across Gu's eyes, and he smiled generously. "Since you're all here for poison, lass, let's go together." Unexpectedly, the man in white suddenly said, "I'll take you with me." Chapter 254. Although the white-robed man hadn't said a word, Long Fei Yi and Gu didn't overlook him. The appearance of a Shadow Clan member here was worth pondering over. Moreover, he'd even said such a thing. Why would he take them away? "What, you know the way?" Gu grinned. Before the white-robed man could answer, Han Yunqi shot Gu a look. He really does know. Long Fei Ye's eyes flashed with a complicated expression. How could a Shadow Clan member know the way to the poison sect Escapades? Could it be that he'd been investigating the truth all this time? Gu suddenly grew angry. "So you were the one who stole the map?" After all, the Escapades was filled with countless twists and turns. It was extremely complicated, so who else besides the medical academy's upper echelons and a map would know the way? Heaven knows whether the white-robed man had stolen the map or not. In any case, Han Yunqi had never seen him take it out. He ignored Gu's accusation and asked, "Miss Yunqi, are we going or not?" It was best if someone could lead the way. Han Yunqi didn't understand the Shadow Clan, so she didn't have any doubts. She could tell that this white-robed man didn't know poisons, so he probably wanted her to help him catch the poison beast. She'd even dared to go with this man when Long Fei Yi and Gu weren't here, much less when they were. Once they found the poison beast, they had more people on their side. There was no need to worry about losing. "Let's go." Han Yunqi agreed easily. But Long Fei Yi and Gu refused to leave. "Hand over the map." Gu's eyes narrowed dangerously. What does the Shadow Clan want with the poison beast? Long Fei Yi was more concerned with this question. The Shadow Clan never lived for themselves. They only lived for one thing in their lives, and that was to serve Western Qin's imperial clan. If Western Qin's imperial clan was destroyed, then the Shadow Clan would die as well. On the other hand, if the Shadow Clan still existed, then Western Qin's imperial clan would have orphans. What the Shadow Clan needed was what the royal family of Western Qin needed. Why did this guy want to go with them? If they went together and found the poison beast, he would not be able to take advantage of it. Thinking of this, Long Fei Yi inadvertently glanced at Han Yunqi. In the face of Long Fei Yi and Gu's aggressive questioning, the white-robed man was as calm as still water. Just as he was about to speak, who knew that at this moment, the ground suddenly shook. The entire cave was shaking as if it was about to collapse. Long Fei Yi immediately grabbed Han Yunqi's hand and asked, "What happened?" "Someone has touched the Tianking's Achilles heel. Before noon, the Tianking will definitely collapse. We must leave as soon as possible," the white-clothed man said seriously. "You also know about the Tianking death acupoint?" Gu was very surprised. The Sky Pit Death Point was the poison sect's most important secret in the Sky Pit. It wasn't drawn on the map, so only the medical academy's upper echelons knew about it. Even he had eavesdropped on it when he was young. It was a mechanism independent of the 100 poison traps, also known as the 101st mechanism. Once that mechanism was triggered, it would cause the entire underground cave to collapse. Everything here would be buried underground, and even the poisonous beast would not be spared. For many years, the Medical Academy's upper echelons had been searching for this mechanism, wanting to destroy the Sky Pit and trap the poison beast forever. Unfortunately, they hadn't been able to find it. Damn it, who was the blind cat that chanced upon a dead mouse and touched this mechanism? As they spoke, large rocks began to fall. Long Fei Yi shielded Han Yunxi as they hid in another cave. Seeing this, the white-robed man was the first to chase after them, even faster than Gu. There's not much time left. Are you leaving or not? The white-robed man asked again. As soon as he spoke, rocks began to fall from the cave they were in as well. The entire ceiling looked like it was about to collapse. Long Fei Yi and Gu didn't hesitate as they said in unison, "Go, lead the way." Leave. Should they quickly escape for their lives or hurry forward to find the poison beast? No one explained, but the white-robed man, Long Fei Yi, and Gu had a tacit understanding. They weren't people who admitted defeat easily. They wouldn't run away. Since they were here, they wouldn't leave empty-handed. When they said leave, they only meant one thing, and that was to continue moving forward. The white-robed man immediately activated the mechanism on the stone wall on the right, opening a secret door to lead the way. The white-robed man was in front, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were behind, Gu and Mu Ling were behind them, and Tang Li was at the back. Long Fei Yi was tightly protecting Han Yunxi, never letting go of his hand. Everyone was flying using Qigong. Han Yunxi didn't know how to fly, but she was the most relaxed one. Her face was pressed against Long Fei Yi's chest, and she could clearly hear his strong heartbeat. Only at this moment did she feel that she was very close to him. Behind them, rocks kept falling, and the cave shook more and more violently. It was as if the whole world was about to collapse. However, Han Yunxi, who was nestled in Long Fei Yi's arms, had the illusion that the whole world was silent. Amidst the turbulence, the alternation of light and darkness, and the rapid rush, he hugged her so tightly that her breathing was a little irregular. However, even so, he still wanted her to get closer. "Hold on tight," he said in a completely commanding tone. "Hold on tight." She couldn't hold on tight to him no matter how hard she tried, so she could only wrap her arms around his waist. She hesitated, but he urged again, "Hold on tight." The speed was too fast. If this woman fell, she would be half dead even if she didn't fall to her death. "I can't hold on," Han Yunxi said in a low voice. She hesitated for a moment, then carefully wrapped her arms around him. This time, her whole body was really pressed against his body. The masculine scent of a man suddenly filled her senses. Han Yunxi found that her heart was beating so fast that it couldn't stop. "Hug him." Feeling the slight movement of her little hand around his waist, Long Fei Yi's lips unconsciously curved into a smile, and he acquiesced. And this scene was clearly seen by Gu, who was behind them. From his point of view, it was Han Yunxi who took the initiative to hug Long Fei Yi. He looked and looked, then suddenly stopped in his tracks as if in a daze. Mu Ling bumped into him from behind. Fortunately, Tang Li reacted quickly and stopped in time. "Gu, what are you doing?" Tang Li shouted angrily. Gu didn't react at all and continued to move forward. Mu Ling looked at his lonely back full of wounds as he chased after Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi. Her heart almost broke. "Chi brother, I definitely won't allow Han Yunxi to hurt you like this. I definitely won't allow it. As the karst cave collapsed more and more, the man in white also became faster and faster, forcing the people behind to speed up to keep up. The group of people quickly shuttled through the karst cave, breaking through secret doors and rushing through secret passages. Unknowingly, they kept going down. Finally, the man in white stopped in front of a huge stone door. They had arrived. Behind this door is the lowest point of the crater. It's also the secret room where the poisonous beast is imprisoned, the man in white said lightly. Everyone thought that the man in white would find a mechanism to open the door. However, the man in white said, "We have to find a way to open this door. I don't know where the mechanism is either." Long Fei Yi knocked on the stone door with the handle of his sword. Hearing the sound, he knew that the door was very big. He gestured for everyone to move aside and swung his sword. For a moment, the sword light was released and the momentum was like a rainbow. Unexpectedly, the stone door didn't even move. Long Fei Yi was surprised and swung his sword again. This time, the sword directly hit the stone door. However, the stone door still didn't move at all. Long Fei Yi's sword was the famous ancient sword, Dragon's Roar. It could cut iron like mud. Coupled with his internal energy, how could it not move a door? This isn't a stone door. Long Fei Yi didn't waste his energy. It's a Xian gold door. No one can touch it, the man in white replied honestly. As soon as these words came out, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Black gold was the hardest thing in the world, and it was the best material to make weapons. A small piece of black gold was enough to make people scramble like ducks, not to mention such a big block. The poison sect was actually using it as a door. Wasn't that a little too extravagant? Of course, the shock was followed by despair. The man in white was right, no one could touch this door. Is there only one entrance? Han Yunqi asked offhandedly. It wasn't clear if the man in white heard her, but he didn't answer. Goose stepped forward to touch it and sighed. Bone-corroding powder can be used for other things, but Xian gold is hard to deal with. Bone-corroding powder was one of the most corrosive poisons, but it was useless against Xian gold. His words reminded Han Yunqi of something, causing her eyes to light up. At this moment, the collapsing sounds around them grew louder and louder. If they delayed any longer, the secret passage they were in would collapse as well. We can only find the switch. It should be nearby, the man in white said seriously. This layout can only be found on the left and right walls. Everyone, split up and search. Tang Li had long been touching the walls. Hidden weapons and mechanisms were similar, so he could be considered half an expert when it came to them. Very soon, everyone was searching the walls on both sides. Only Han Yunqi remained standing in place. As the white-clothed man looked over, his eyes that had always been as calm as water actually flashed with a hint of anxiety. He looked at the crowd again. While no one was paying attention, he gently rubbed his finger against a rough spot on the wall. As he rubbed, his finger seemed to have been cut by something, and blood oozed out, leaving a bloody mark on the wall. However, the strange thing was that the bloodstains quickly disappeared, as if they had been absorbed by the wall. The man withdrew his finger and hid it in his palm. Miss Yunqi, I'll go over there. You can look around here. Han Yunqi walked over and was about to touch the wall when she suddenly stopped. I have a way to corrode this wall. Hearing this, Long Fei Yi was the first to look over, his eyes flashing with warning. There was still a poison in this world that could corrode Xian gold. Its name was Perplexing Butterfly Illusion. Chapter 255. Perplexing Butterfly Illusion. It was a type of poison that could vaporize anything in an instant. Forget about the door in front of them, even the poisonous beast inside would be vaporized in an instant, vanishing without a trace. When Long Feiyi handed the perplexing butterfly illusion to Han Yunxi, although he told her not to ask too many questions, he also didn't tell her not to tell anyone about it. Seeing the intense warning in Long Feiyi's eyes, Tang Li also quickly thought of the perplexing butterfly illusion. This was something that determined Long Feiyi's life. It was too important to him. The perplexing butterfly illusion was hidden in Han Yunxi's sleeve. Was this woman going to take it out? Poison girl, what idea do you have? Gu was very much looking forward to it. He loved the surprises this girl brought. The white-clothed gentleman looked at the blood-sucking wall, then looked at Han Yunxi. Although he was anxious, he still restrained his temper and waited. He had spent so much effort to lure this girl here to verify her identity. He couldn't be impatient and fail at the last moment. After all, the people here weren't simple people. They all had sharp eyes. He didn't believe that Han Yunxi had a way to corrode this wall. There was still some time before the cave collapsed. He could wait. Good stuff. Han Yunxi smiled as she answered Gu, taking out medicine from her medical pouch. Seeing this, Tang Li couldn't help but say, Han Yunxi, don't use things that don't belong to you. This reminder was obvious enough. Anyone who heard it would know that there was a problem. Han Yunxi definitely knew what he was referring to. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi didn't stop. Not only did she not understand the warning in Long Feiyi's eyes, she even deliberately looked at Long Feiyi meaningfully before taking out something from her medical pouch. In an instant, everyone looked over and waited. What kind of surprise would this woman give them? Tang Li clenched his fists and readied his hidden weapons. Although he had already acknowledged Han Yunxi, he would never allow anyone to betray Long Feiyi as long as it involved the perplexing butterfly illusion. Seeing that Tang Li was about to make a move, Long Feiyi pressed his hand down. Long Feiyi, wake up. There must be no exceptions to this. Tang Li whispered angrily and anxiously. What was the use of this guy warning Han Yunxi with his eyes? He was so cruel to everyone, but why couldn't he do it to this woman? Long Feiyi just held Tang Li's hand and stared at Han Yunxi's hand in silence. Tang Li wanted to break free, but Long Feiyi was too strong. He couldn't even move an inch. Long Feiyi, don't forget that this thing belongs to your mother. Tang Li reminded him in a low voice. Long Feiyi was slightly startled, but he didn't let go in the end. At this moment, Han Yunxi took out the item. It was a large bottle. It wasn't the usual porcelain bottle used to store medicine, but a black-colored glass bottle. It couldn't be seen what was inside. The moment he saw the glass bottle, Tang Li felt as if a stone had been lifted from his heart. He let out a huge sigh of relief and whispered, Long Feiyi, you can, let go now. Thank goodness, this girl was still reliable. Looking at the bottle in Han Yunxi's hand, he knew that it definitely didn't contain perplexing butterfly illusion. The bottle that contained perplexing butterfly illusion was a simple blue and white porcelain bottle. It was a very special porcelain bottle. In this world, only that porcelain bottle wouldn't be corroded by perplexing butterfly illusion. It's this thing. It's a secret recipe. Han Yunxi smiled and deliberately glanced at Long Feiyi. Actually, she had seen this guy's warning just now. Did he think that she would take out perplexing butterfly illusion? Was she that unreliable? If he didn't trust her, why did he give her such an important thing? Since he gave it to her, why didn't he explain its origins to her? Why was this guy always so contradictory? Seeing Han Yunxi look at him, Long Feiyi immediately avoided her with an expressionless face. Perhaps Han Yunxi was used to it. Seeing him like this, not only did she not mind, she actually had the urge to continue playing with him. What the hell is this? Gu curiously moved closer. Mu Ling had been standing to the side, silently looking at Han Yunxi. Her expression was full of resentment, but unfortunately, no one had the time to notice her. Smell it. Han Yunxi opened the glass bottle. Not only Gu, but everyone present immediately smelled a pungent smell. Although they didn't know what this medicine was, Mu Ling, who was familiar with medicinal properties, immediately knew that this thing was extremely corrosive. She didn't really believe that this thing could corrode black gold, but she believed that it could definitely destroy Han Yunxi's face. She covered her nose, a trace of ruthlessness flashing through her eyes. Here's my chance. She stared at the thing in Han Yunxi's hand. Just as she was about to make a move, Gu suddenly turned to look at her. Mu Ling immediately withdrew her hand, panic written all over her face. Unfortunately, Gu never paid attention to the expressions on a woman's face, and the others didn't pay attention to Mu Ling either. They were all focused on the thing in Han Yunxi's hand. Ling, can you smell it? Gu asked. Mu Ling, was a genius pharmacist and had a wide range of knowledge. Mu Ling's heart, which had almost jumped out of her chest, finally calmed down. She forced herself to calmly shake her head, unable to speak. She grew up in Medicine City and wholeheartedly studied medicinal herbs. Although the various branches fought openly and secretly for the position of the family head, her talent allowed her to avoid these struggles. She didn't need to go anywhere and didn't need to make friends with anyone. She only needed to make medicine and her father would protect her at all costs. She didn't seem to have any worries growing up. Her life was very simple, and her personality was also very pure. All her emotions were written all over her face. It wasn't until she met Chi brother that she began to have worries, but they were also sweet worries. However, when Han Yunxi appeared in Chi brother's life, her world turned dark. Even her bright heart dimmed. For the first time, she learned to hate and be jealous. It was also the first time she had evil thoughts. When she thought of what she had just done, her hands trembled. She was afraid and guilty, but she didn't regret it. Chi brother was an orphan with no one to rely on. He seemed to like to smile, but in reality, he wasn't a happy person. She wanted him to be happy. She absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to hurt him. Seeing Mu Ling shake her head, Gu didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he asked Han Yunxi, "What is this? Where did it come from?" He and Mu Ling didn't know what it was, so basically no one else did. Only Han Yunxi had it. "I concocted it." Han Yunxi was telling the truth this time. Can it really corrode black gold? Even Gu Qishao had his suspicions, to say nothing of others. Just watch. Han Yunxi was very confident. She looked at the black gold wall again and finally determined a position before applying the potion. Of course, she wasn't stupid enough to corrode the entire wall. She only needed to corrode an entrance that could allow one person to pass through. Han Yunxi knew that time was tight, but this matter couldn't be rushed. She gently applied the potion in circles and layers. The room was silent. Everyone's attention was on Han Yunxi's hand. Seeing that the black gold wall didn't move for a long time, the people who didn't believe it to begin with gradually became suspicious. Han Yunxi, can it work? This place is about to collapse. Tang Li asked anxiously. Poison lass, don't joke around with everyone's lives, Gu teased. Only Long Fei Yi and the white-robed man didn't speak. The white-robed man looked on silently with furrowed brows, as if he'd noticed something strange about the black gold wall. Meanwhile, Long Fei Yi's attention had long rested on the white-robed man. At this moment, a large boulder suddenly fell from above and landed right by Mu Ling's feet. Frightened, Mu Ling immediately hugged Gu. Chi brother. Han Yunxi stopped and looked back, but Gu immediately pushed Mu Ling aside. Of course, he didn't explain anything, but urged, "Poison lass, can you do it or not? Miss Yunshi, don't try anymore. Let's look for the mechanism. It should be on this wall," the white-robed man spoke up hastily. But right at this moment, a stream of golden liquid slowly flowed down from the Xian gold wall. Seeing this, everyone grew alarmed. The white-robed man knitted his brows even more. "We won't make it in time at this speed. This place is about to collapse. It'll melt very quickly once it starts. Just wait a moment." Han Yunshi was certain. The liquid in her hands was none other than super strong aqua regia. Aqua regia was an extremely acidic liquid that was one of the few liquids capable of melting metal. Super strong aqua regia was something Han Yunshi had specially made and was sometimes used to refine medicine. Aqua regia dissolved metal more slowly, but this super strong aqua regia was different. A single bottle was enough to help her get rid of the obstacle before her. As Han Yunshi had said, more and more of the golden liquid began to flow down faster and faster until it became a stream of water. A small hole had already appeared in the Xian gold wall, through which one could see the inside. Everyone was stunned by the sight before them. Even Long Fei found it hard to believe. Xian gold was hailed as the world's hardest material. Tian Shan Kenzo's sect head had a Xian gold sword that was hailed as the world's #1 sword, but Han Yunshi had a way to destroy it in such a short time. This woman was too frightening. Soon enough, the hole grew larger and clearer, revealing everything behind it. Han Yunshi glanced at it and grew alarmed. She didn't have time to explain the super strong aqua regia to the stunned crowd, but cried out, "Jun Xia and Duanmu Yao are inside." How was this possible? Long Fei stepped forward to look through the hole and really did see Jun Xia and Duanmu Yao's figures. It was completely empty inside, except for the two of them. There was nothing else, much less the poison beast. Could there be another entrance? Where's the poison beast? How did they get here so quickly? Tang Li asked several questions in succession. At this time, Gu gestured for everyone to keep quiet. "Listen, it's the poison beast's voice." As soon as he finished speaking, another large rock fell from the sky. This time, it didn't fall far and didn't hit anyone's feet. However, following closely behind the rock was Chapter 256. Following the boulder was a huge black rat. It was twice the size of a normal rat. It fell to the ground with its 4 legs facing the sky, struggling non-stop. "That's it." Han Yunshi looked at it from afar, her face full of suspicion. She imagined the poisonous beast to be ferocious and tall, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. "That's not the Gu Shu. The Gu Shu is imprisoned inside, it won't come out that easily," Gu explained. Han Yunshi sighed in relief. She thought it was the poisonous beast that came out. She thought that since the poisonous beast was called the Gu Shu, it should be a huge rat. Long Fei and Tang Li's attention was focused on Jun Xia and Duanmu Yao behind the Xian gold door. They didn't pay attention to the huge rat. Snakes and rats were in the same nest. If there was a snake in the secret passage, there would definitely be rats. There was nothing strange about it. Han Yunshi melted the Xian gold without making a sound. The secret room was huge. Jun Xia and Duanmu Yao were quite far away, so they didn't notice anything strange. "If we don't kill it now, when will we?" Tang Li was about to take out the torrential pear blossom needles to attack Jun Xia when the man in white suddenly said in a low voice, "Such a huge rat, I'm afraid it grew up eating human flesh." Once these words were said, everyone's expression changed greatly. Rats that grew up eating human flesh. Wasn't this the ferocious flesh-eating rat that only existed in legends? Based on their physique, these rats couldn't be compared to the word beast at all. However, their attack power was far beyond that of a ferocious beast. They were similar to flesh-eating ants. They never moved alone, but moved in a large nest. A nest of flesh-eating rats would have hundreds of them, and a large nest could even have thousands of them. In other words, as long as one flesh-eating rat appeared, it meant that there was a nest of flesh-eating rats nearby. Who would have thought that the long-extinct flesh-eating rats would appear here? Long Fei Yi and Tang Li hurriedly turned around to look. The appearance of the flesh-eating rats was enough for them to temporarily put Jun Yixia aside, because no one in the world had ever been able to escape from a group of flesh-eating rats. The rats were twice the size of normal rats. Their eyes were red, and their fangs and claws were especially obvious. It was hard to imagine how terrifying it would be to be bitten by this group of rats. In the silence, everyone stared at the flesh-eating rat in the distance. No one spoke for a long time, and the atmosphere gradually became tense. After a long while, Gu said, "There's no human meat here. Are you sure you're not mistaken? It can't be wrong. The poison sect has raised flesh-eating rats before, so Gu Shu probably summoned them here," the white-robed man said seriously. "You know quite a lot," Gu said meaningfully. The poisonous beast had the ability to summon poisonous creatures from the sinkhole. Once the poisonous beast felt threatened, it would send out a signal to summon the nearest poisonous creatures. Just like the Skypid death acupoint, this was a secret of the poison sect as well as the medical academy. He had eavesdropped on it, so how did the white-robed man know? He didn't even know that the poison sect raised flesh-eating rats, so how did this fellow know? Why did the Shadow Clan know so much about the poison sect? Could it be that the Shadow Clan had some sort of relationship with the poison sect? Gu's suspicions were just that, but there was no time to ask in such a dangerous situation. The white-robed man ignored Gu's suspicions and even gave up on probing Han Yunxi. In a low voice, he said, "Miss Yunxi, how much longer will it take for you to melt the Xian gold wall?" As long as the Xian gold wall wasn't melted, they had no way out. Unexpectedly, as soon as his voice fell, there was a sudden rustling sound from the top, and then a large group of rats fell from the hole one after another, densely pouring down like a flood. This scene was simply disgusting. Oh! Mu Ling was so scared that she curled up in a ball. She retreated to the back of the group, her shrieks loud enough to pierce through the roof of the cave. Long Fei Yi was the first to rush to Han Yunxi's side. "Be careful." The rats kept falling out of the hole, unlike the one from before. Now all of them flipped to their feet as soon as they hit the ground and ran towards them. Still, they didn't attack immediately. Soon enough, hundreds of flesh-eating rats had all fallen to surround Han Yunxi's group in 4 or 5 layers, trapping them in front of the Xian gold door. Although there were fewer rats than the king cobras and they were not as venomous as the king cobras, they were much harder to deal with than the king cobras. This swarm of flesh-eating rats was extremely crafty. They only knew how to pick a single target and move as one to kill. Right now, pairs of scarlet eyes were staring covetously at Han Yunxi's group as they searched for their first target. Tang Li couldn't help but swallow his saliva. What should we do? Just 10 flesh-eating rats were enough to devour a person within a minute. Once these hundreds of flesh-eating rats pounced on a person, they would be able to devour the person until only the bones were left. That was simply something that could be done in the blink of an eye. Regardless of whether the surrounding people were martial arts experts or poison experts, no matter what method they used, they would not be able to kill all the flesh-eating rats in time. This was a competition of speed and quantity. Guess, who will they choose first? Gu joked, but his smile was pale. Being devoured until only bones were left, that would be enough to die. But this way of dying was too tragic. There's actually no difference. The white-robed man revealed a terrifying fact. Once the flesh-eating rats had devoured one person, they would quickly pounce on the next. Legend had it that in the history of the Great Qin Empire, a group of flesh-eating rats had annihilated an entire army. Then we can only run. Before the flesh-eating rats attacked, run. Long Fei Yi turned his head to look at Han Yunxi. Without his reminder, Han Yunxi had already taken out a large bottle of super-strong aqua regia to speed up the melting of the Xian gold wall. If possible, Han Yunxi would be more willing to pour the super-strong aqua regia on the flesh-eating rats. Unfortunately, she didn't have enough. And even if she had enough, facing such a large group, it would be impossible to kill them all at once. If she didn't kill them all, it would instead cause the flesh-eating rats to counterattack. At that time, she would be the first to die. In fact, Han Yunxi didn't only have super-strong aqua regia that could kill the flesh-eating rats. There were many poisons that could do the same. But the principle was the same. This group of beasts had the advantage in numbers and speed. Han Yunxi took out all the super-strong aqua regia from the detoxification system and used it. The Xian gold door melted very quickly. The golden liquid continued to flow down, and more of it, the hole became bigger and bigger. However, at the same time, the flesh-eating rats seemed to have chosen their targets. One by one, they were lying on the ground, ready to pounce at any time. Han Yunxi, you go in first. Long Fei Yi said in a low voice. He stood in front of Han Yunxi. He said to let her go in first, but in fact, he wanted her to escape first. It's almost done. If we want to escape, let's escape together. Han Yunxi used all her strength to melt the Xian gold door. She casually gave the last bottle of aqua regia to Mu Ling. Help, quickly. Mu Ling was still trembling. But when she received the aqua regia, she suddenly calmed down. She looked deeply at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi's attention was all on the Xian gold door. At this time, the hole was almost big enough for one person to pass through. Mu Ling held the aqua regia tightly, as if hesitating. However, at this time, the rats on the ground all arched their backs. Not good. The white-clothed man exclaimed. The flesh-eating rats were about to attack. Mu Ling was so scared that her whole body trembled. Her hands went soft, and the super-strong aqua regia fell to her feet. Seeing this, Han Yunxi suddenly pushed her away. Pang! The super-strong aqua regia fell to the ground. At the same time, Mu Ling also fell to the ground. At this time, the flesh-eating rats suddenly let out a sharp squeak. In this situation, anyone could guess that Mu Ling was their target. Mu Ling Han Yunxi exclaimed. She did not think much and pulled Mu Ling Han Yunxi, let go immediately. Long Fei Yi immediately ordered coldly. Han Yunxi was simply asking for death. The flesh-eating rats wanted to attack Mu Ling If Han Yunxi pulled her, the flesh-eating rats would treat her as a target and attack her together. Han Yunxi really did not think much about the consequences. Her first reaction was to save her. She subconsciously raised her head to look at Long Fei Yi, but it was too late. In an instant, the flesh-eating rats rushed towards the two of them at lightning speed. Han Yunxi. Poison lass. Long Fei Yi and Gook shouted in unison. At this time, they did not care whether they could save her or not. They also did not care whether they would suffer together with her. They both wanted to pull Han Yunxi away. However, someone was faster than them. They only saw a white shadow sweep past. It was so fast that they could not react. The white-clothed man's eyes were full of determination. He pulled Han Yunxi to the side of the wall and pulled her hand across the wall. This process was so fast that it was terrifying. Not to mention the others, even Han Yunxi herself was confused. She completely did not know what had happened. She only felt that her 5 fingers were scratched by something and it was extremely painful. Boom! With a loud sound, the Xian gold door collapsed with a loud crash. Run! The white-clothed man shouted. With the abilities of everyone present, escaping was still possible. Fortunately, everyone reacted quickly. Gu carried Mu Ling, while the white-clothed man carried Han Yunxi. The group of people rushed through the door in unison. At this time, a surprising scene occurred. The dense swarm of flesh-eating rats that were crazily rushing towards them suddenly stopped abruptly and stopped outside the Xian gold door. They let out an incomparably sharp squeaking sound. It was unknown whether it was out of unwillingness or fear. Unexpectedly, not a single one dared to take half a step forward. Everyone who had escaped far away saw this and finally stopped. They all heaved a sigh of relief. That was simply a matter of life and death. It was too dangerous. This was the secret room where the poisonous beast was kept. Since these flesh-eating rats were summoned by the poisonous beast, why didn't they dare to come in? And what exactly happened just now? Why did the door collapse? After taking a deep breath, everyone was suspicious. Long Fei Yi asked coldly, Han Yunxi, where's the white-clothed man? When he escaped, he immediately looked at Han Yunxi. However, he found that Han Yunxi was standing alone. The white-clothed man was nowhere to be seen. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi in a daze. She slowly stretched out her 5 fingers. Her 5 fingers all had small wounds that were still bleeding. Where's the white-clothed man? She also did not know. Everything just happened too suddenly. She really did not know how it happened. When she came back to her senses, she was already standing here. The Xian gold door collapsed, the flesh-eating rats stopped, and the white-clothed man disappeared. Chapter 257. Everyone thought that the white-clothed man came for the poison beast and kidnapped Han Yunxi so that Han Yunxi could help him deal with the poison beast. However, everyone seemed to be wrong. After the white-clothed man brought them here, he actually left without saying goodbye. That white figure was so fast just now, it could only be him. The person who opened the Xian gold door could only be him. Long Fei Yi still understood the speed of the Shadow Clan, but that speed just now had exceeded the normal speed of the Shadow Clan. Long Fei Yi knew that that fellow must have used all his strength. If it wasn't for that speed, they would have been swallowed by the flesh-eating rats. Although he didn't know how he opened the Xian gold door, this door was definitely opened by him. And what did this have to do with Han Yunxi? Looking at Han Yunxi's bleeding fingers, Long Fei Yi's eyes darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. Han Yunxi was also confused. Her 5 fingers seemed to have been scratched by something. The wound was very small, but it kept bleeding. It was very painful. She didn't know if the wound on her fingers was accidental or if the white-clothed man did it intentionally. Ling, do you have medicine to stop the bleeding? Gu anxiously asked. Mu Ling, looked at Han Yunxi with a complicated expression. She didn't answer for a long time. Mu Ling, Gu anxiously said. Mu Ling came back to her senses. Just as she was about to take the medicine, who knew that Long Fei Yi would pull Han Yunxi's hand and actually suck on her finger in front of everyone. In that instant, Han Yunxi, who was still in a daze, felt like she had been electrocuted. Her entire body trembled and her entire body immediately tensed up. However, Long Fei Yi didn't just suck on her finger, he even gently sucked on it. His lips were cold, but his blood was warm. Han Yunxi could even feel the wet tip of his tongue resting on her fingertips. This feeling was extremely similar to a kiss. Oh God, she couldn't take it anymore. For a moment, everyone looked over and saw that Han Yunqi's face was as red as a ripe apple. Long Fei Ye's actions were so gentle that it was unlike him. After a long while, Long Fei Ye finally let go of Han Yunqi's finger. However, he quickly sucked on her other finger as gently as before. God knows how Han Yunqi withstood it. After Long Fei Ye sucked her 5 fingers one by one to stop the bleeding, she was almost paralyzed. Actually, it was normal for her to stop the bleeding. If she couldn't even stand it, what if in the future, Han Yunqi didn't dare to think further? She realized that she was thinking too much. Long Fei Yi held her hand and examined it. She lowered her head, and her cheeks were still red. She didn't dare to raise her head. This scene made Tang Li's jaw almost drop. Although he had seen Long Fei Yi kiss Han Yunqi forcefully, he still found it hard to believe that he was so intimate with her again. This cousin of his had been a clean freak since young. Not to mention women, he wouldn't easily have physical contact with men. Of course, this scene was especially dazzling to Gu. The flesh-eating rats are gone. He reminded loudly, breaking the ambiguous atmosphere in the air. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi ignored him. He was such a person. His actions were so gentle, but his voice was always cold. No one could tell that he cared. He looked down at Han Yunqi, who had her head buried, and asked coldly, "Does it still hurt?" "It doesn't hurt anymore." Han Yunqi carefully withdrew her hand from his. For the first time, she felt a sense of belonging between husband and wife. She felt that she belonged to this husband. Long Fei Yi didn't ask any more questions. He looked out of the door and saw that the flesh-eating rats had completely dispersed. It was as if they had never appeared. Regardless of whether they were unwilling or in awe, they couldn't enter the secret room. Did the man in white know about this? The huge secret room was empty. The imprisoned poison beast was nowhere to be seen. Jun Yixia and Duan Muyao, who were there just now, were all gone. This was the lowest point of the sinkhole. It was the place where the poison beast was imprisoned. It was actually the most dangerous place. "Be careful," Long Fei Yi whispered. Everyone stood back to back in a circle. They were all on high alert. Tang Li looked around and quickly realized that something was wrong. This Xian gold door isn't the main door. The main door is over there. Looking in the direction Tang Li pointed, they saw a stone door that could be pushed. It wasn't sealed like the Xian gold door. It was just a little collapsed, but it didn't prevent people from entering and exiting. Looks like Jun Yixia and Duan Muyao triggered Tinking's death acupuncture point. Gu was very sure. Once triggered, one would directly fall to the lowest point of the sinkhole. The stone door of the secret room must have collapsed because the death acupuncture point was triggered. The man in white had a map. The door marked on the map should be the main door. The man in white seemed to have deliberately led them to open the Xian gold door. Could it be that they took the poison beast away? Tang Li asked suspiciously. There was no one in the secret room. Jun Yixia and Duan Muyao had both left. That was the only explanation. Impossible. Jun Yixia doesn't have the ability to do that. Gu immediately refuted. Even if he came, he would have to bring Mu Ling, to help. Jun Yixia's poison skills were very strong, but he definitely couldn't control the poison beast. Duan Muyao, who was traveling with him, was even more impossible. "Let's go outside and take a look," Long Fei Yi said lightly. Who knew that before they reached the door, they would see a huge Xian gold shackle on the ground. Such a huge shackle could only be used to restrain the poison beast. Could it really have been stolen? Han Yunqi was also shocked. Long Fei Yi squatted down to examine it carefully. He found that the iron shackle was very intact. There were no signs of it being cut. The 2 shackles were also intact and hadn't been opened. Gu took a look and followed the iron shackle all the way to the foot of the wall. He found that the other end of the iron shackle was still fastened to the wall and hadn't been cut. Strange. The shackle was intact, but the poison beast had disappeared into thin air. What does the poison beast look like? Han Yunxi asked seriously. Unfortunately, no one could answer. Even Gu, who knew a lot about the sinkhole, hadn't seen the poison beast's true appearance. At least it's not small. Judging from the shackle, the Gu Shu was at least the size of a bear. However, it was really hard to imagine what kind of rat would be so big. If it was a rat, wouldn't it be too disgusting? Let's go outside and take a look. There were only 2 doors to the secret chamber. Whether it was the poison beast, Juni Xia, or Duan Muyao, they could only leave through the stone door. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi walked side by side at the front. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment but still opened her mouth. Duan Muyao and Juni Xia are together. Before Han Yunxi could finish, Long Fei Yi interrupted her. I heard it in the snake cave. Han Yunxi suddenly didn't know what to say. He said he heard it, but did he hear Duan Muyao and Juni Xia's voices? Or did he hear her say she wanted to complain? Actually, she wanted to ask if Western Zhou and Northern Li were in cahoots. With Long Fei Ye's influence, if these 2 countries were in cahoots, he would definitely know. Since he said that, she really didn't know how to continue asking. Actually, she wanted to ask about his attitude towards this matter. Would he announce it to the world? They walked out of the stone door and saw a small stone path outside. Pebbles were scattered all over the ground. Long Fei Yi stopped to look at it for a moment, then continued walking. Han Yunxi hesitated whether to continue the previous topic. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the front. It was getting louder and louder, as if something was approaching. What a familiar sound, Tang Li muttered to himself. Rats! Those rats are coming again. Mu Ling, suddenly screamed. Mu Ling, words alerted everyone. This sound was indeed the same as the flesh-eating rats they heard before. The sound was getting closer and closer. Should they advance or retreat? Could it be that the flesh-eating rats hadn't left yet and were waiting for them outside? Just as everyone was hesitating, 2 figures dashed out from the darkness ahead. They were none other than Juni Xia and Duan Muyao. And behind them was none other than the swarm of flesh-eating rats from before. Juni Xia and Duan Muyao ran for their lives. Even when they saw Long Fei Yi and the others, they didn't stop and ran forward frantically. Retreat. Long Fei Yi made a prompt decision. He pulled Han Yunxi and retreated. Everyone retreated. Gu immediately went forward to close the stone door. We'll open the door later to collect their corpses. As he spoke, he was about to close the stone door, but Long Fei Yi called out, "Wait." Gu glanced around to make sure everyone was there. He asked irritably, "Who are you waiting for?" Long Fei Yi didn't answer. He let go of Han Yunxi's hand and pulled out his sword to block the stone door. Unexpectedly, he flew out. Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi blurted out. She couldn't believe what she saw. Was this man crazy? Why did he go out? To throw his life away. She was about to follow when Gu stopped her. "Poison girl, do you want to die? Get out of the way." Han Yunxi panicked. This wasn't a joke. This was a matter of life and death. They had just come back from the gates of hell. However, Gu didn't have to stop her. She calmed down quickly. Long Fei Yi was already flying over with Duan Muyao in his arms. Juni Xia was hot on their heels, and so was the swarm of flesh-eating rats. So this was the reason. He was risking his life to save Duan Muyao. Han Yunxi frowned. She suddenly lost the ability to think. Princess Duanmu was the one he had rejected the marriage alliance with, but at the same time, she was his only junior in Tianshan Kenzo. Han Yunxi had never forgotten the first time Long Fei had brought her out to face the poison python. He'd watched her fall from a tall tree, but he hadn't hesitated to save his little junior sister, Duan Muyao, who'd provoked the python on purpose. Long Fei Yi and the others were getting closer. The flesh-eating rats were also getting closer. Han Yunxi stared blankly. Unexpectedly, Mu Ling, who was standing at the side, suddenly came forward and pushed her out of the way. I don't need your hypocrisy. I hate you. Han Yunxi was caught off guard and fell heavily to the ground. No one expected this to happen. Long Fei Yi was so fast that he couldn't stop. When Han Yunxi fell, he grabbed Han Yunxi and flew through the door. Jun Yixia was right behind them, grabbing her by the neck. Chapter 258. Everything had happened too quickly. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi should have returned together and locked Jun Yixia and Duan Muyao outside the door. But who knew that things would turn out like this? Han Yunxi was still in a daze. When she was pushed out of the secret chamber, she could only watch helplessly as Long Fei Yi brought another woman into the secret chamber. She fell right next to him, but he didn't stop. This feeling was really terrible. Actually, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were both caught off guard. As soon as he landed, he immediately pushed Duan Muyao aside and rushed towards the door without even looking at her. But all he saw was Jun Yixia clutching Han Yunxi's neck with a warning look on his face. Let go of her, or this prince won't let you off. Long Fei Yi's rage soared to the heavens. At the side, Gu couldn't be bothered with Mu Linger anymore. He anxiously said, Jun Yixia, if you want to settle the score, come in first. If Jun Yixia still didn't come in, the flesh-eating rats would be here soon. Unexpectedly, Jun Yixia actually demanded an exorbitant price. This prince can go in, but all of you have to come out. Otherwise, this prince won't be willing to go in. What an unwillingness. You have to be willing even if you don't want to. Gu flashed his folding fan and was about to make a move, but Long Fei Yi didn't waste any words. He had already pulled out the whip at his waist and stepped out of the door. However, Jun Yixia immediately tightened his grip on Han Yunxi's neck. He said coldly, this prince can kill her first. When he said this, Long Fei Yi and Gu both stopped. Jun Yixia was going all out. Either he and Han Yunxi lived, and Long Fei Yi and the others all died to the flesh-eating rats, or he and Han Yunxi died to the rats, and everyone in the secret chamber lived. He did not give Long Fei Yi a second choice, nor did he leave a way out for himself. He was betting on just how important this woman was in Long Fei's heart. Who knew how important this woman was in Long Fei Yi's heart? In any case, she herself didn't know. Han Yunxi's neck was tightly choked. She couldn't breathe and couldn't speak at all. At this moment, she was the most dangerous one. It was very likely that Jun Yixia would kill her before the flesh-eating rats could reach her. However, her face was expressionless. She looked at Mu Linger, then at Long Fei Yi and Duan Muyao. Her gaze was deep and unfathomable. Wasn't she afraid? She was afraid, but she had experienced this kind of despair too many times in her life. Even if she was afraid, it was useless. Doing good only to be repaid with evil. Using love only to be ruthlessly repaid. She was always the one covered in wounds. When she heard Jun Yixia's condition, Duan Muyao immediately shouted angrily, Jun Yixia, what do you mean by this? Jun Yixia actually wanted her to leave. Jun Yixia was poisoned, and she had helped him a lot along the way. This guy was kicking her to the curb after she'd outlived her usefulness. Didn't they agree that she would cooperate with him and he would help her kill Han Yunxi? Who would have thought that he would dare to take Long Fei Ye's life? Duanmu Yao had overestimated the weight of her words. No one paid her any attention. Jun Xie, think carefully. If Han Yunxi dies, you'll die too. Only the heavens knew how angry Gu was. He had never called Poison Lass by her full name before. Mu Ling was frightened. She knew that Qi brother didn't have time to settle scores with her now. Once all this was over, she didn't know how Qi brother would treat her. A trace of regret flashed through her heart. Mu Ling gritted her teeth. She couldn't ignore it even if she wanted to. She tried her best to tell herself that she wasn't wrong. Jun Xie didn't even bother with Gu. The only enemy in his eyes was Long Fei Yi. He said slowly, Long Fei Yi, we don't have much time left. Should he trade everyone's lives for Han Yunxi's, or should he turn around and close the stone door so that Jun Xie and Han Yunxi would be buried in the rats' bellies? Long Fei Yi was caught between a single thought. In a flash, everyone turned to look at Long Fei. At this moment, the man in white who was hiding behind the stone also looked at Long Fei Yi. He didn't leave. His brows were tightly knitted and he was ready to make a move. Unfortunately, his injuries were too serious. Blood was still flowing from the corner of his mouth, staining a large patch of his white mask red. Just now at the Xian Gold door, he had used up all his internal energy to reach that speed. Now, he was powerless. However, he still paid attention to Han Yunxi and the others. He still worked hard to circulate his internal energy. Even if he could become a cripple, he didn't care. Because this woman's blood had opened the Xian Gold door. He was sure that she was the person he needed to protect in this life. She was also the meaning of his life in this world. More and more blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He continued to circulate his internal energy and didn't give up. On the other side, Long Fei Yi finally made a decision. He said, one life for several lives. This prince won't do this kind of unprofitable business. When these words came out, everyone was shocked. Han Yunxi's deep eyes finally couldn't light up anymore and immediately dimmed. This was Long Fei Yi's choice. How cruel. Long Fei Yi, are you sure? Jun Xie was very surprised. The hand that was strangling Han Yunxi relaxed. However, Long Fei Yi was waiting for this opportunity. Just now, he had been looking for Jun Xie's weakness. He couldn't give up on Han Yunxi. He could use everyone's lives to exchange for Han Yunxi, but it was a very stupid thing to do. He was as calm as ice and was never an impulsive and brainless person. Taking advantage of Jun Xie's relaxed vigilance, Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes and focused on Jun Xie's shoulder. Waves of internal energy secretly poured into the soft whip in his hand. Only the heavens knew how much strength he used in this whip. His forehead was already covered in sweat. In the silence, Han Yunxi looked at him. Her eyes seemed to have lost focus, but he didn't have time to care. He looked at Jun Xie's fatal weakness and was about to lash out. But in the end, human calculations were no match for heaven's plans. Just as Long Fei was about to lash out with his whip, there was a sudden rumble from the top of the stone door. A giant boulder tumbled down with it, followed by a giant rat. This scene was so familiar. Didn't the flesh-eating rat come from the front? The movement in front was very close. Could it be that it was above their heads? Everyone subconsciously raised their heads and saw a black mass of flesh-eating rats pouring down like a torrential downpour. One after another, they fell down. Heavens, there were actually 2 nests of flesh-eating rats. Long Fei Yi and Gu retreated almost at the same time. They were almost smashed. These flesh-eating rats were blocking the large stone door, separating Long Fei Yi and the rest from Jun Yixia and Han Yunxi. The strange thing was, compared to the people in the secret room, Jun Yixia and Han Yunxi's position was more obvious and easier to attack. But the rats completely ignored them. They were restless in front of the secret room's large stone door. They wanted to enter but didn't dare to. Everyone felt that it was strange. But at this moment, no one had the time to think about the reason. With the flesh-eating rats blocking the door, Long Fei Yi and the rest were completely blocked. Long Fei Yi's prepared whip could have saved Han Yunxi in one move. But at this moment, he was completely unable to lash it out. He didn't lash out with his whip. With a stomach full of anger, his expression was so gloomy that it was terrifying. Jun Yixia of course also noticed the strange behavior of the flesh-eating rats. He didn't understand why it was like this. But he held tightly onto Han Yunxi and didn't dare to move recklessly. At this moment, another group of flesh-eating rats had caught up from behind. What was even more unexpected was that this group of flesh-eating rats which were originally chasing Jun Yixia actually passed by Jun Yixia and Han Yunxi and blocked the entrance of the secret room together with another group of flesh-eating rats. What's the meaning of this? Don't tell me they're coming for us. Gu, who always liked to laugh, was irritated. Tang Li was also angry and punched the wall. Mu Ling, He and Wan Muyao stood at the side silently, each with their own thoughts. Long Fei Yi's handsome brows were tightly knitted. He didn't say a word and just stared at Han Yunxi. After so long, he finally noticed that this woman's gaze was as calm as still water. In this situation, with her ability, how could she allow Jun Yixia to threaten her? At this moment, with her personality, how could she be so quiet? But up until now, she hadn't made a move. In the past, when she looked at him, she would be foolishly infatuated, she would blush coquettishly, she would glare angrily, and she would also avoid him in fear. That kind of true personality, she didn't hide it, didn't pretend. It had never been like this before. Her gaze was so desperate, as if she had given up on everything, including him. Long Fei Yi couldn't care less about the flesh-eating rats. An inexplicable sense of fear suddenly attacked his heart. This was the first time in his life that he felt fear. What's wrong with this woman? Is she feeling unwell somewhere? Jun Yixia, let go of her. Long Fei's sudden roar gave everyone a fright. They'd never seen this man lose all reason before. This roar immediately alarmed the flesh-eating rats at the door. One by one, they all arched their backs and scratched their claws restlessly. Seeing this, Jun Yixia's lips curled into a cold sneer. Sure. As he spoke, he really let go of Han Yunxi's neck. But at the same time, he very impudently hugged Han Yunxi's waist. Jun Yixia. Long Fei Yi gritted his teeth and clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. In the silent secret room, it was especially clear. Jun Yixia swept a glance at the flesh-eating rats on the floor and sneered. Long Fei Yi, I hope we can still. Goodbye. As he spoke, he hugged Han Yunxi tightly and turned to leave. Jun Yixia, this prince will make you regret it. Long Fei Yi angrily shouted. He was just a little bit away from shouting for Han Yunxi. But in the end, he didn't do it. Jun Yixia's shoulder was injured. Why didn't this woman resist? She clearly had hidden weapons all over her body and her pockets were filled with poison. Jun Yixia's haughty back gradually faded into the distance until it disappeared into the secret passage. Meanwhile, the flesh-eating rats remained by the entrance, showing no signs of dispersing. Heaven knows when they'd give up and scatter like before. Strange. The white-clothed man muttered to himself. The flesh-eating rats were summoned by the poisonous beast to deal with intruders. There was the poisonous beast scent in the secret room. The flesh-eating rats were instinctively afraid and didn't dare to enter. As for why the flesh-eating rats didn't attack Han Yunxi and Jun Yixia, he also couldn't figure it out. Just now at the Xian Gold door, the flesh-eating rats still wanted to attack Han Yunxi. And Jun Yixia was also being chased very miserably, wasn't he? Why did they suddenly stop attacking? Where's the poisonous beast? The white-clothed man glanced at the secret room again. He was full of confusion, but he didn't have time to investigate further. He took a deep breath, clutched his chest, and hurriedly chased after Jun Yixia. Chapter 259. It was unknown when the flesh-eating rats that had surrounded the entrance of the secret room had dispersed. In short, Jun Yixia hugged Han Yunxi the entire way, and there were no pursuers. Jun Yixia had directly slid into the poisonous beast's secret room because he had triggered Tinking's Achilles heel. The path that he had come from had not been sealed by the collapsed rocks. He followed the path that he had come from and quickly flew out of the karst cave, towards Tinking's entrance. The map had been stolen, and Tinking's Achilles heel had been triggered. The medical academy's guards had tightly surrounded Tinking. It would not be easy to escape from everyone's eyes. However, with Jun Yixia's ability, it was still possible for him to break out of the encirclement. He hugged Han Yunxi tightly with one hand, and pulled up his mask with the other. Just as he was about to leave, Han Yunxi, who had been very quiet the entire way, suddenly opened her mouth. Her voice was as cold as ice. Jun Yixia, if you expose my identity, I will definitely let everyone in Northern Li country know that His Highness Duke Kong is the 100 Poison sect master. There were guards all around Tinking. Jun Yixia had put on his own mask, but he had forgotten about her. Jun Yixia's hand seemed to be gently hugging her, but he was actually using a lot of strength. If Han Yunxi struggled, her waist would definitely break. It was not strange that Han Yunxi did not struggle. However, this sharp-tongued woman had been silent the entire way, which was not normal. Jun Yixia had been on guard for a long time, but he did not expect Han Yunxi to warn him like this the moment she opened her mouth. He sneered disdainfully, Han Yunxi, don't forget that you are now in my hands. Han Yunxi was still expressionless. His Highness Duke Kong, don't forget that only I can cure the poison in your shoulder. This time, no one had seen the poisonous beast. In other words, Jun Yixia did not use the poisonous beast's blood to cure the poison. The poison in his shoulder could only be cured by Han Yunxi. Upon hearing Han Yunxi's words, Jun Yixia laughed loudly. What, you are in this prince's hands, and you still don't plan to give me the antidote? I really don't have any plans, Han Yunxi replied fearlessly. Jun Yixia was not angry. He just chuckled, and then suddenly pressed Han Yunxi's head into his arms, hugged her tightly, and soared into the sky. This time, Han Yunxi struggled. However, the more her head moved, the tighter Jun Yixia's big hands pressed down. Her whole face was pressed tightly against his chest, and even breathing was difficult. One of her hands was pressed tightly against his body, while the other was wrapped around her waist. She couldn't move at all. Bastard! Han Yunxi cursed in her heart. Was she too kind, so everyone bullied her? Did he really think that she was a sick cat if she didn't show her might? At this time, Jun Yixia had already rushed to the top of the crater with her in his arms. The moment the medical guards saw them, the archers immediately lined up and shot thousands of arrows. Jun Yixia ran and dodged at the same time. He was highly focused. Unexpectedly, at this time, Han Yunxi suddenly opened her mouth and fiercely bit down on his chest. Biting, a woman's most powerful martial art. In the past, she was able to bite Long Fei Yi in pain. Of course, compared to that time at Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi didn't use any poison this time. The poison on June Xie's shoulder was her biggest bargaining chip. She had a lot of poisons, but she never wasted them. June Xie never thought that Han Yunxi would bite him. He subconsciously looked down and at this time, a sharp arrow flew towards him. June Xie hurriedly turned his head to avoid it and was almost hit. Damn it! This woman did it on purpose. She chose to bite him when he couldn't be distracted. June Xie had no choice but to let go. Han Yunxi, do you believe that this prince won't throw you back? Han Yunxi then loosened her bite and said indifferently, up to you. If you don't want to live. If she died, who would help him cure the poison? He was the dignified 100 Poison sect leader, a formidable person in the poison world. Yet he still didn't know what kind of poison was in his shoulder and how long it would take for the poison to take effect. If this matter were to spread, how would he be able to establish himself in the poison world? June Xie was furious. He had kidnapped this woman several times and finally succeeded this time. However, he didn't feel any sense of accomplishment. Instead, he vomited to death. June Xie chose to remain silent and stopped fighting with Han Yunxi. He concentrated on dealing with the arrows coming from all directions. But who knew that Han Yunxi, who was in an extremely bad mood, had nowhere to vent her anger. She didn't intend to let him off. Taking advantage of June Xie's release, Han Yunxi suddenly reached out to grab his injured shoulder. Others didn't know that the wound on June Xie's shoulder had yet to heal, but Han Yunxi was very clear about it. Furthermore, she knew that the only way to make the wound hurt was to scratch it hard. Han Yunxi! June Xie roared in pain. When Han Yunxi was in a bad mood, she wasn't afraid of anything. She didn't answer but used even more strength. June Xie couldn't take it anymore and tied her hands again. Han Yunxi struggled violently. June Xie dodged the arrows while dealing with Han Yunxi's disturbance. Not long after, his other shoulder was hit by 2 arrows. At this time, the medical school's guards chased after them with their qinggong. Han Yunxi, that's enough. June Xie gritted his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. He could only let her scratch him while he focused on dealing with the medical school's guards. When June Xie dodged the arrows with Han Yunxi and escaped into the surrounding forest with the help of the medical school's guards, his shoulders were already dripping with blood. As soon as he landed, he threw Han Yunxi away ruthlessly. He didn't have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. How could there be a woman in the world who could torment Northern Li's Kong Wang like this? Han Yunxi fell to the ground and it hurt a lot. However, no matter how painful it was, it couldn't compare to the pain in her heart. She didn't even frown. She sat up and looked at June Xie coldly. June Xie was treating his wounds. When he saw Han Yunxi staring at him, his anger rose. He immediately kicked up a pile of soil and threw it at Han Yunxi's face. Bitch! This wasn't the first time that this woman had touched his bottom line. Han Yunxi turned her face away, but she was still hit by the soil. However, she didn't mind June Xie's behavior. A man who repeatedly kidnapped and threatened women. How could she expect him to have tender feelings for the fairer sex? How could she expect him to negotiate with her nicely? Han Yunxi wiped her face a few times. She still looked at June Xie coldly without saying a word. Seeing her expression, June Xie looked at her warily as he treated his wounds. He was afraid that she would sneak up on him again. Although he didn't want to admit it, he really didn't know what to do with this woman. This time, Han Yunxi didn't move. She just looked at him. Her gaze gradually became a little dull, as if she was in a daze. There seemed to be something wrong with this woman, but he couldn't tell what was wrong with her. After treating his wounds, June Xie forced himself in front of Han Yunxi. He stretched out his hand in front of her and said cold, the antidote. Long Tianma's antidote. Han Yunshi also stretched out her hand. Looking at the sky, it would be dark in a few hours. It was time for the appointment with Third Elder. If she couldn't find the poison beast, what could she use to save Long Tianmo? What could she use to win against Third Elder? What could she use to clear her and Gu Beiyue's name of injustice? She could escape from Tianing country. Actually, she didn't want to stay any longer. But she couldn't let the name Han Yunshi tarnish in the medical world. She also couldn't bear the burden of a murder case for the rest of her life. She was a doctor. In her career, she'd never failed. She couldn't accept this. I already said that there's no antidote, Jun Xia said angrily. Then what right do you have to ask me for the antidote? Han Yunshi cold retorted. Jun Xia abruptly lifted Han Yunshi's chin and squeezed it tightly. You don't have the right to talk terms with this prince. I'm not talking terms with you. I'm just saying that you don't have the right to ask me for the antidote, Han Yunshi disdained to retort. At these words, Jun Xia was so angry that the veins on his forehead were about to pop out. He tightened his grip, almost crushing Han Yunshi's chin. Han Yunshi, don't think that this prince won't dare to kill you just because you can't cure the poison. If worse comes to worst, this prince can just give up on this shoulder. Although he didn't know what the poison on his shoulder was, he was very clear that the poison was only there and hadn't spread. I'm guessing that you can't bear to. As expected, Han Yunshi had the ability to anger people to death. Actually, she didn't mean to provoke Jun Xia. She was just casually replying. Right now, her heart was very stuffy and chaotic. She only had one firm thought, and that was that she didn't want to return to Tianing. She didn't want to see a certain person. She didn't take Jun Xia's matter to heart at all. She was conflicted about where she should go from here. Long Feiyi, you don't have to like me, but you can't treat another woman well when you're treating me well. Han Yunshi was absent-minded, but Jun Xia was furious. Han Yunshi, this prince won't kill you, but this prince wants you to live a life worse than death. As Jun Xia spoke, he suddenly tore open Han Yunshi's collar. Only then did Han Yunshi completely recover from her thoughts. She quickly pressed down on his hand and said angrily, Jun Xia, have some sense of propriety. Propriety. Jun Xia gave a cold smile. With a sudden tug, he tore Han Yunshi's outer clothes apart. Han Yunshi cried out in alarm and began to struggle violently. Jun Xia, you're shameless. You're not a man. Whether this prince is a man or not, you'll find out very soon. Jun Xia's eyes turned red from anger. He didn't intend to violate Han Yunshi, he just wanted to scare her and let her know what fear was. But who knew that when he saw Han Yunshi's primitive fear, he couldn't stop himself. So this woman who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth also knew fear. Would she submit to him if he truly had her? With this thought, Jun Xia's large hand began to move downwards. Scram! Han Yunshi was scared out of her wits. She never thought that Jun Xia would be so shameless. She was so scared that she forgot that she had hidden weapons and poisons. Right at this moment, a white figure appeared out of thin air. It was none other than that masked man in white. At this moment, his mask was completely dyed red. He almost fell down the moment he landed and couldn't even stand properly. It was as if he had been seriously ill and his body was very weak. However, he still rushed over and grabbed Jun Xia's shoulder, pulling him away fiercely. He immediately took off his outer clothes to cover Han Yunshi. He clearly couldn't hold on any longer and would fall down with a gust of wind. However, when he turned around and saw Jun Xia, his eyes shot out a monstrous killing intent that pierced straight into one's heart. Jun Xia, unless I die, don't even think of touching a single hair on her. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.